Georg Buschan, America Section, English Translation 1. Die Sitten der Völker, Volume 3. The Customs of the Peoples. America, Complete English Translation of the America Section. Book pages 127 to 222. Georg Buschan, Translator's Note. This is a faithful English translation of a historical ethnographic work published in the early 20th century. The original uses terminology, racial classifications, generalizations, and value judgments that are outdated and in some cases offensive. They are retained or translated closely here because the purpose is to reproduce the historical source, not to endorse its claims. Figure numbers and illustration captions are preserved so that the text can be synchronized with the accompanying slideshow images. This edition preserves the original figure numbers and captions so the narration can be synchronized with the separate slideshow image pack. Georg Buschan, America Section, English Translation 2, America, Photo, Dr. Arnold Heim. Figure 153, Eskimo women in front of their hut, which is made of poles and skins. The mothers carry their children on their backs in a kind of carrying frame without thereby being hindered in their work. When they sit down, the frame falls forward, and with it the child, which the mother skillfully catches. Arctic America. Arctic America consists chiefly of the Eskimo, and a number of North American Indian tribes that have, in part, associated themselves with them culturally. The Eskimo, or as they call themselves in their own self-consciousness, the Inuit, meaning human beings, present in their outward appearance a very definite type, figure 155. They are of medium stature, men about 157 centimeters, women about 149 centimeters, and of powerful build, which gives them enormous strength and endurance. The lower limbs are short. The hands and feet are rather small but well formed. Their skin color is a light brownish yellow, while the uncovered parts of the body show a darker tone. The abundant hair of the head is thick, coarse, straight, and black. The men's beard is usually quite sparse and begins to grow only at a comparatively late age. The skull is rather high, the face round and broad, the nose very flat with broad wings. The lower jaw is distinguished by an especially massive development, a little projecting chin, and very broad branches. The cheekbones project strongly, the dark eyes are slit in a Mongol-like fashion. In this outward appearance, the Eskimo show clear relationships to the North American Indians, and on the other hand, even more conspicuously to certain North Asian peoples. Culturally, they display a very marked connection with the former. On the basis of this fact, Boas maintained that their homeland should be sought in the regions east of the Bering Strait, apparently the area between Hudson Bay and southern Alaska, from where they spread westward, eastward, and northward. In advancing this conjecture, however, too little account was taken of the physical characteristics that had led earlier investigators to relate the Eskimo to Siberian peoples. Perhaps both views can be reconciled if one assumes that the formation of the Eskimo took place generally in the regions around the North Pole, and that they possibly represent the remnants of a primordial race that arose in this region and perhaps also gave rise to the Yellow Race. This assumption does not exclude the possibility that several centuries ago a new movement of American Eskimo into North Asia occurred, something that seems historically established. Photo, Dr. S. K. Hutton, figure 154, a snow dwelling of the Eskimo in winter. The Eskimo today inhabit the southern parts of Greenland's east coast and the entire west coast of Greenland, northern Labrador, the southern islands of the archipelago, the whole north and northwest coast from Hudson Bay to southern Alaska, the northern islands of the Bering Strait, and Cape Chukotsk on the Asian mainland. They lead a wandering existence along the seacoasts, since their main occupation is hunting and fishing. In summer they therefore live in tents, sewn together from seal or reindeer skins and supported by paddles or ordinary poles. A larger piece of fabric, made from seal intestine, serves as a door covering. In winter, by contrast, they move into permanent dwellings, which they hollow out in the ground and cover with moss or earth over a roof framework made of wood or whale ribs, or into snow houses. A short, low passage, through which one can usually move only by crawling, leads to the single interior room, along whose walls runs a wooden platform serving as a sleeping place for the whole family. In these buildings, men, women, and children of different families live closely crowded together, In them people are born, people become sick, and people die. From them they are also carried to the grave. From Transactions, Department of Archaeology, University of Pennsylvania. Figure 155. Eskimo from King Island, Alaska, with tobacco pipe. Personal cleanliness is not a virtue of the Eskimo. The original tribes are indescribably dirty in their appearance and habits, and it is difficult even to teach those Eskimo, who have already been settled under European influence, the simplest notions of cleanliness. This may perhaps also result from the fact that water is difficult to obtain, since it must be produced from snow or ice by melting it with fuel that is valuable because it too is hard to obtain, and therefore it is used for more important purposes than washing. Under these circumstances, the Eskimo not infrequently wash themselves with their own urine. The Eskimo obtain their principal livelihood from hunting seals, whales, and other marine mammals, as well as land animals such as musk oxen, reindeer, and birds, and from fishing for salmon, trout, and so forth. They are a maritime people who seldom venture far from the coast. In their hard struggle for existence, they are dependent above all on the seal, which supplies them with food and clothing and also provides light and fuel. They are true meat eaters. In summer they venture out onto the open sea in their kayaks, or hunt after musk oxen and reindeer. The kayak is a one-man boat made from driftwood and fitted with a tightly stretched covering of sealskin. Only a circular opening is left in this covering, into which the man, sitting on the floor of the boat, fits completely. It is therefore fitted by the builder to the customer like a piece of clothing, and the man and his boat form, as it were, a single whole. The equipment of a kayak includes a so-called bird arrow, a harpoon, a lance, and an inflated sealskin hunting float, which lies behind the paddler. For propulsion, the Eskimo uses a double-bladed paddle, the handling of which requires special skill. Another type of boat is the umiak, or women's boat, so called because formerly it was steered exclusively by women. These are open boats of the usual shape, likewise consisting of a wooden framework covered with skin. During the long Arctic winter, the Eskimo live packed into the single room of their huts, eat, drink, sleep, make love, and are cheerful. No unpleasantness ever seems to arise among them. Tolerance and amiability are the most prominent traits of Eskimo character. Indeed, they are said not even to possess a word expressing scolding, nor any term for war. In general, they are sparing with words. Their language is said to be so poor in words that a single word expresses many things for which other languages have different terms. When disputes arise among the Eskimo, they generally settle them in a quite successful fashion. The person who feels injured gives expression to his grievance in a song. When he has finished composing it, his opponent is summoned to appear and listen to the song. A general social gathering then develops, attended by the friends of both parties. The offended person performs his song to the accompaniment of a drum. If it wins applause, this is regarded as a victory for the singer, and his complaints are acknowledged as justified. If, however, the assembly expresses dissatisfaction with his song, this counts as punishment. At such gatherings, dancing is also customary, which raises the general mood. The Eskimo are also extraordinarily hospitable, especially when one tribe visits another. A most peculiar feature on such occasions is the so-called greeting duel, in which those greeting one another fight a genuine duel by exchanging slaps in the face, apparently a survival of an original aversion to strangers. Photo Dr. Arnold Heim, Figure 156, Eskimo cutting up a seal. Seal hunting is one of the most important events in their life. In the background at left is a kayak. The clothing of the Eskimo is fairly similar for both sexes. It consists of an upper and a lower garment. Each of these is composed of a sleeved jacket, which has only a single opening for getting into it, and therefore must be pulled over the head, and trousers. The women's trousers are shorter, resembling, so to speak, bathing drawers. The men of southern Greenland wear a hood on their jacket. The women wear a high collar of black sealskin with a broad, colorful bead necklace over it. In addition come the kamiks, stocking and boot in one piece, which rise higher on women because of their short trousers. They consist of an inner sock of sealskin, with the hair turned inward, and an outer shoe of hairless, waterproof hide. The Eskimo love to sew brightly colored strips of leather onto their garments. These are cut with the women's knife, ulo, into geometric patterns, circles, diamonds, squares, dyed in different colors, and sewn onto the clothing in tasteful arrangements. In this, the women show particular skill and good taste. Belts made in this manner even form an article of lively export trade. Photo Dr. S.K. Hutton, Figure 157, Eskimo hunting seals from floating ice floes. Sometimes these floes drift away from the land and out to sea. Their occupants must then die a slow and agonizing death. Because of its stiffness, Eskimo hair is not easily arranged in an attractive style. Nevertheless, the women do know here and there how to give themselves a pleasing appearance. The men usually let their hair grow as it will and often do not cut it at all. It is held back from the face with a band or strap. The women, on the other hand, gather their hair into a knot on top of the crown and fasten it there with a band. This hair knot is a source of great pride. The wearer's principal effort is to make the knot stand as stiffly upright as possible. The varying color of the band that holds the tuft together is interesting. Unmarried girls wear it red, unmarried mothers green, married women blue, and widows black or white in old age. Body ornaments include tattooing, figure 160, plugs in the lower lip, cheek buttons, and ear pendants. Photo, Dr. S.K. Hutton, figure 158, Eskimo woman fishing. The goggles serve as protection against the glare of the snow. The Eskimo are great lovers of song and dance, accompanied by modern musical instruments. Their present-day dances also resemble European ones. Adults as well as children enjoy games, figures 162 and 165. For example, a kind of football played with an inflated hunting float, or a whip game, in which the object is to drive a bone across a smooth surface, hard frozen snow or ice, toward a particular goal by striking it with a whip. Old and young alike are very fond of singing, and not infrequently set quite everyday occurrences to music. The religion of the Eskimo consists of belief in spirits. The spirit most feared by them is that of death, called Torngok. He is said to live in a cave in the lonely mountains. Since life and human fortune are believed to lie in his hands, all kinds of precautions are taken to appease him. The intermediary between him and the people is the shaman, or Ongakok. The shaman is also the keeper and master of the family spirits. From this comes his great power. When a young Eskimo has reached manhood, he buys his family spirit from the Ongakok. Stephenson gives a very vivid description of such a purchase. A young Eskimo had learned that an old shaman was gradually giving up his business and wanted to dispose of a few good spirits cheaply. "I no longer need them," said the old man, "and they will be useful to you. Would you perhaps like to have my polar bear spirit?" "I would most like to possess the current breaking spirit," replied the other. "No, I need that one to the very end," answered the old man. "But you shall have my raven spirit. That is a reliable and effective spirit. You will certainly have pleasure from him." The young Eskimo then acquired the raven spirit for a new boat, 20 fresh skins, 2 jars of seal oil, and several other useful things. If a spirit acquired in this way does not display the promised effectiveness, the shaman will say by way of excuse, "I cannot help you. I transferred him to you in good faith, and if you belong to those with whom the spirits want nothing to do, then I can only pity you." Stephenson also tells another example of how familiarly the shamans supposedly deal with the spirits. One of the most common entertainments during the long winter night among the Eskimo is the shaman's journey to the moon. The whole village assembles in the hut, men, women, and children. They sit on the benches below, while the shaman crouches up near the roof beside the only existing window. Several men tie him there very tightly with ropes. Then the room is made completely dark. All participants must also close their eyes, and the older people hold the children's eyes shut. The shaman holds a rope to which a solid object, a hammer or stone, has been tied and swings it around. At the same time he begins a song. "I do not feel as heavy as usual," he begins. "It seems to me that I am not sitting firmly on the earth. Now I am becoming light as a feather." He then continues in a disguised voice, as though it were coming from above. "Now I rise, now I am already flying, and faster, and finally, now I am hovering high above your heads, now I am flying through the window," and so forth. His voice becomes more and more indistinct, until at last the shaman whispers as though from an infinite distance. He then experiences all kinds of things on the moon, and converses with the man in the moon and his wife about the prospects for hunting, while the assembly remains in deepest darkness and silence. Finally, after about half an hour, his voice becomes louder again, and at last the shaman is heard clearly calling, Now I am floating back through the window and coming down to the ground. Now open your eyes and light the lamps." He must then tell of his experiences on the moon, giving his imagination as free a rein as possible, while everyone listens devoutly. This is the climax of the celebration. Just as he can deal with the moon, the shaman knows how to communicate with every kind of spirit, whether they dwell deep in the sea or in secret places on land. At religious festivals, Georg Buschan, America section, English translation 6. Grotesque wooden masks are worn. From Transactions, Department of Archaeology, University of Pennsylvania. Figure 159. An Eskimo woman of Nunavagmut, Nunavak Islands, Alaska. The pagan customs are declining more and more, for the Eskimo have been very receptive to the influence of missionaries, and many of them have accepted Christianity without hesitation. In general, the Eskimo show a strong inclination to adopt European culture, since they are convinced that they fare better by doing so. Photo, Roald Amundsen, Figure 160, Eskimo woman with arm tattooing. Tattooing occurs only among part of the Eskimo. The Eskimo know no wedding customs. Marriage among them is an entirely sober affair. If a man needs a wife, he simply gets one, who then performs her marital duty toward him. No special formalities take place. If the man is not satisfied with his wife, he sends her home again and tries another, or he may keep her with him, but take a second wife beside her. In this case, the second occupies the position of a concubine, but if the first wife should die, she moves into her place. Polygamy is nothing unusual. An exchange of wives also occurs. It is regarded as a sufficient dowry if the woman brings her clothing, a lamp, and a knife. In spite of the easy manner of forming marital unions described above, the Eskimo attach great importance to kinship. The lot of the Eskimo woman is not a joyful one, for her domestic occupation involves a great deal of work. She must prepare the skins in order to make clothing from them. For this purpose, the removed seal skins are first worked with the women's knife and scrapers, tanned, fulled, and made supple, and in doing so, the women not infrequently chew them with their teeth. When women continually treat this difficult material in this way, as often happens, their teeth are frequently worn down to the gums. The skins are then cut into garments and sewn together with bone needles and strips of seal intestine. Figure 161. A lonely grave monument. The modest possessions of the dead person are laid beside the grave. Photo, Underwood and Underwood. Figure 162. Sports among the Eskimo. The Eskimo are great lovers of all kinds of sport, such as wrestling, jumping, and spear throwing. Every married Eskimo wishes to have male offspring. Parents care greatly for their children. They treat them with such care and love as one would hardly expect under the unfavorable conditions that prevail. From cradle to grave, the Eskimo must struggle for his existence, and nevertheless, he does whatever he can for his children. Indeed, in many cases, he does not limit himself to his own children, but readily adopts orphans, even if he already has a number of children to support. These adopted children are then treated with the same kindness and conscientiousness as his own. Small children are generally carried on the back above the shoulders in a kind of pouch, an enlargement of the upper garment, lined with seal or reindeer fur, and providing the little ones with a comfortable, warm, and secure shelter. In this way, the mother is not hindered in carrying out her work and other duties. Georg Buschan, America section, English translation 7, courtesy of the Moravian Mission. Figure 163. An opened Eskimo grave. Very often the graves are exposed by roaming dogs or violent storms. Photo, Dr. S.K. Hutton. Figure 164. The komatik or dog sled, the Eskimo means of transportation on land. The draft dogs are guided with extraordinarily long whips. The Eskimo are doomed to decline. As a rule, they do not reach an advanced age, since their hard struggle for existence, and in particular, their frequently inadequate food, claim many victims among them. Tuberculosis has already carried off many. The bodies are either buried in the earth or thrown into the sea. The property of the deceased is either laid down on the shore or on his grave, figure 161. This is done partly so that the dead person will no longer be recalled, and partly because it is assumed that he can use his property in the spirit world. In earlier times, the corpse was wrapped in skins and laid on bare rocks. The clothing and simple objects that the dead person had used in life were placed with him. Among some tribes this is still customary today. Among the more civilized tribes, wooden boxes obtained from traders are used as coffins. Wood is very scarce among the Eskimo and therefore much sought after. The most important source is driftwood from wrecked ships. Coffins obtained in the manner described are buried only a little way into the earth, so that it not infrequently happens that the Eskimos' dogs dig them up and in their voracity devour the corpses, figure 163, especially since they can easily break open the weak boxes used as a makeshift in the absence of durable coffins. The habit of wandering about means that the Eskimo leave the place where a burial has taken place after a short time, so that the dogs can soon go about their work. These animals, half wolf and half dog, are very dangerous and treacherous, and occasionally attack human beings as well. For generations, they were the friends and companions of the Eskimo in Labrador, and were used chiefly as teams for sleds. Figure 164, but in more recent times, they have increasingly been displaced by reindeer, which the government introduced into the country. The advantage of the reindeer is that it has proved useful not only as a draft animal on the Eskimos' frequent journeys, but also provides a welcome variation in their diet through its meat. Dr. S. K. Hutton, figure 165, Eskimo children sledding. The cheerfulness characteristic of the whole people is displayed very clearly here. Photo, George Wharton James. Figure 166, participants in a Hopi snake dance, snake and antelope men. They hold snake whips made of eagle feathers and prayer sticks, bahos. At the knee they wear rattles made from animal hooves or tortoise shells. The signs painted on their bodies, like the patterns of the loincloths, have symbolic meaning. Georg Buschan, America Section, English Translation 8, The Rest of North America. The North American Indians form a strikingly uniform mass of peoples in comparison with the different peoples occupying a similarly extensive area in the Old World. In all probability, they are the descendants of representatives of a fusion of successive waves of immigration that, certainly in a very remote period, reached the continent partly from Asia and partly from Europe by connecting land bridges that formerly existed on a larger scale. During the Miocene and Pliocene periods, North America was still in firm connection with both continents. This immigration must already have taken place before humankind had learned to work metals. This follows from the fact that when Columbus arrived, most tribes were still living in the Stone Age, and only a few of the more advanced, such as the Mexicans and Peruvians, had reached the use of bronze. Nor, at the time of this immigration, had humankind done much in the field of animal domestication, since Columbus's successors found only the dog as a domestic animal in North America. Finally, people at that time cannot yet have begun agriculture, since it is certain that those immigrants brought no cultivated plants from the Old World, but only later began to cultivate a native plant, maize from Central America, for their daily bread. Accordingly, the first arrivals in America can only have been at the level of the Paleolithic hunters and fishers of the Ice Age, and may perhaps have belonged to one of the interglacial periods. Excavations carried out so far agree with this assumption. They have shown that the presence of humans in North America reaches back into the warm interglacial period, which apparently coincided with the same period in Europe. Human beings have not yet been demonstrated in America for the Tertiary period. When people appeared here, languages must still have been in such a changeable condition that they could easily divide. The ethnographer J. W. Cowell distinguished 58 separate language groups north of Mexico alone, which in turn are divided into innumerable different dialects. For South America, various indications point to the fact that immigration must also have taken place from the South Seas. Research on this question is still entirely in its early stages. Figure 167, an Indian chief with his characteristic feather headdress. From these European and Asian immigrants, there developed in the course of time, under the influence of the changed environment and their isolation, a special type of humanity whom we call Indians, or Redskins because of the red body paint. In its basic features, this type is, as already stated, quite uniform, but in some details, especially stature and skull form, it shows great variety. Corresponding to their varied composition, the type of the Indians strongly recalls that of the Mongols, but differs from it again, through the larger and more powerfully projecting nose, the larger eye with only slight or entirely absent slanting of the eye opening. On the other hand, echoes of the European type cannot be denied either, such as the formation of the face, especially the strongly curved aquiline nose, stature, and various other features. The Indians, Figs 167 and 168, are generally above medium height, strongly and evenly built, though in some places their stature may be very low, Pueblos, and elsewhere exceptionally tall, Iroquois, Patagonians. Their skin color is not red, as laypeople wrongly suppose, but a reddish or yellowish brown. All shades occur, from blackish brown to light brown. The hair of the head is coarse, straight, black with a brownish sheen, and often very long, including among men. On the rest of the body, as well as on the face, the hair system is sparsely developed. The beard, moreover, is generally removed. The skull is generally short-headed, though long-headed tribes also occur. The forehead is well-arched, the face broad, oval, or round. The eyes are always black and deeply set. The nose is throughout large and projecting, its bridge straight or curved, the aquiline nose. From an economic point of view, the North American Indians may be divided into three groups. Most of them stand at the level of hoe cultivators, are therefore sedentary, and possess well-built houses. A second group, the Prairie Indians, the best known being the Sioux, are chiefly devoted to hunting buffalo, elk, beaver, and deer, are therefore constantly on the move, and carry their dwelling with them in the form of a collapsible skin tent, Figs 170 and 171. The third group consists of the Indians of California and Oregon. All of them still stand at a rather low level. Some already possess permanent houses, round structures, while others have only windbreaks. They obtain their food by gathering plants and fruits, especially acorns. Among the Prairie Indians, leatherworking formerly flourished. Accordingly, their clothing consisted exclusively of this material: the familiar leggings, moccasins, a sleeve jacket, and a large buffalo hide cloak. Fig 172. Most Indians today already dress in European fashion. Photo, Reinhold and Thiele. Figure 168. A Tsimshian chief from the Skeena River, British Columbia, in ceremonial dress. The large mask to his left represents Lithwaki, the robber of naughty children. The Pueblos possess a quite distinctive culture, one feature of which is the construction of their settlements. These are the so-called village houses on isolated plateaus, Fig 173, or also on the plain, which shelter an entire tribe, hence the name Pueblos, and are therefore built up from numerous individual cells, terrace-like, and at the same time in rows, over, beside, and beneath one another. Access to them is possible only by ladders. The Pueblos practice agriculture. Some tribes possess highly developed skill in basketry, weaving, and ceramics, especially the Hopi, Figs 174 and 175. Peculiar is the method used by Pueblo women in dressing their hair, Figs 176 and 177. The North American Indians believe, insofar as they have not converted to Christianity, Figs 178 and 179, in a world of spirits, which in their view stands above the material world revealed through the five senses. Spirits, Fig 180, are everywhere, in the earth, in the air, in fire and water, and indeed in everything enclosed by these four elements. Townsend offers an interesting observation in this connection. On one occasion he tried to buy from a Navajo a new bow, which the man had made himself, and had already used for a successful shot at a deer. The Indian would not part with it under any circumstances, for as he said, his new bow, although the work of his own hands, now possessed a spirit of its own, and the first shot had proved to him that this spirit was friendly toward him. Therefore, he did not dare separate himself from the bow. This man certainly recognized the good qualities of the bow, its successful shape, the tautness of its string, and its elasticity. But behind these qualities he imagined within the bow a being with feelings similar to his own, capable and willing to help him in the hunt, and under certain circumstances, to harm him. In a similar way, the Indians imagined the entire world around them as populated by innumerable spirits, whose behavior toward them may have consequences of wholly incalculable importance. Photo, Dr. W. R. Shufeldt. Figure 169. Paul Showay, Chief of the Cayuse. Georg Buschan, America Section, English Translation 10. The Cayuse are a small but brave tribe of Oregon Indians, now for the most part absorbed into the Nez Perce and Walla Walla. Photo W. M. Rao, Philadelphia. Figure 170. Indian Tent Camp. A peculiar arrangement is used for transporting loads. Two long poles crossing in front of the horse's saddle run along the animal's sides, and at their rear ends carry a platform formed of crosspieces. Photo, the exclusive news agency. Figure 171. Tents of the Blackfoot Indians. Formerly they were made of buffalo hides, now of cloth. The tops of the tents are blackened by the smoke rising from them. In the picture, a funeral procession moves between the tents. The Algonquin language possesses a word, manito or manitou, which is often used as a general term to express the sum of the mysterious powers behind the sensory world. Kichi Manitou, or Great Spirit, is then understood as roughly equivalent to God. To what extent this idea of a Great Spirit who contains all the others within himself can be traced back to Christian teachings conveyed by missionaries over the centuries is difficult to say. The conception of a Great Spirit is, however, unquestionably widespread among the Indians, and the more highly developed a tribe is, the more clearly it appears. Yet this Great Spirit is not always regarded as being as benevolent as he is powerful. In their grand creation legend, the Sioux and Fox Indians describe Kichi Manitou as a being who had his children killed out of fear of their rivalry, and as punishment for this, was banished to an Indian hut on the shore of the White Stream, in the firmament, our Milky Way. His surviving son Waisake underwent the customary adventures of a culture hero. He tried to fly up to his friendly ancestor, the sun, on the wings of the buzzard, which at that time bore colors as bright as a parrot. But the treacherous buzzard slipped away beneath him, and the hero fell to earth, narrowly escaping being smashed to bits. As punishment, the whole race of buzzards was condemned to perform earthwork in order to prepare the earth for the human beings whom Waisake intended to create. From that time on, the buzzards also lost their splendid colors, and were exposed to the hatred and contempt of humankind. Waisake then created humanity out of red earth, taught them all sorts of arts and dances, and introduced them to hunting and the cultivation of maize, in general, to everything necessary for their happiness. When he had done all this, he bade the people farewell, and at the same time told them that he was going north, and would build himself a hut in ice and snow. He would, however, visit them again every year at the first snowfall, and one day appear before them again in his own form, but in youth and beauty, in order then to lead the people to the happy land in the west, where his brother ruled over the spirits of their ancestors. After that, he himself would turn back again and destroy the world from which he had led them away. This expectation of the hero's return exists among the Indian tribes almost everywhere. Just as in Europe during the Middle Ages, people dreamed of the return of King Arthur, Charlemagne, and Barbarossa, so the North American Indian almost daily hopes for the reappearance of Waisake. Townshend observed how the Pueblos stood every morning, wrapped in their blankets, on the flat roofs of their houses, and kept watch toward the east, from where they expected the return of the Messiah, who had departed from them. Georg Buschan, America section, English translation 11, Peru, Yucatan, and Mexico to the hunting grounds of the far north. The Indians await the return of their semi-divine hero, who taught them the arts of peace and war. This hero, however, is not always regarded as so benevolent and just as the Sioux portray theirs. The Indians created their gods in their own image, and thus their hero was only too often endowed with the same virtues and vices as the Indians themselves. After a painting by F. Seth, the flute ceremony or lenya of the Hopi Indians. This extremely complicated sacred ceremony occupies 9 days, the last of which is called Tihune, and is performed at Walpi as well as in 4 other Hopi districts. Photo M.A. Owen, figure 172. Sioux on the way to the sun dance, which takes place in spring. On this occasion, vows made by the men in times of war and by the women in cases of illness are fulfilled. The peace pipe makes the rounds, the chiefs give wise counsel, and medicine women fast and pray for the common welfare. Photo R.B. Townshend, figure 173. Walpi, the site of the Hopi snake dance, at the end of a narrow sandstone cliff rising 600 feet above the plain. Naturally, no tribe has been able to preserve its traditions unchanged. As they were handed down from generation to generation, much was forgotten or misunderstood. And since the way of life of the people sometimes changed, the supernatural beings kept pace with it and adapted themselves to the new demands by changing as well. The Navajo, for example, a wandering pastoral people, have no supreme chief, and imagine their spirit world could be as democratic as they themselves are. They therefore believe in many powerful spirits who must be appeased, but know no higher being who rules the rest. It is interesting that the most important of these spirits, Sinatlahi, meaning the woman who is young, is regarded as female. It is not improbable that this conception was taken from nature, which grows old toward the end of the year, and renews its youth every spring. This spirit, also known by the name Wailahe, is regarded as the supreme being in the world of the departed, where she guards the river crossings that must be passed in order to reach the happy hunting grounds or grazing lands of the spirits. Wailahe strongly protects her own sex. A Navajo who mistreated his wife during his lifetime can scarcely expect mercy from her when he wishes to cross the river leading to the paradise of his tribe. Thus it happens that Navajo women, in complete contrast to those of other tribes who are, as it were, nothing more than patient beasts of burden, participate to a high degree in public life. Whatever the nature or sex of the spirits whose favor the Indians seek, all must first and foremost be appeased through special solemn rites, especially dances. Figure 182. Before such a ceremonial dance, they usually undergo purification, either by a prolonged stay in a sweat house or by fasting. Afterward, they appear unclothed and painted, adorned with masks and beads, and hung with foxtails and green garlands, dance in slow, solemn circles, and invoke the spirits to grant them sunshine or rain, fertility or successful hunting. The Pueblos, and among them especially the Hopi, perform dances, mostly masked dances, figures 181, 183, 184, 185, and 188, as well as the color art plate, in order to secure the help of their tribal ancestors. Cornmeal or flower pollen is scattered when the harvest spirits are being petitioned. Human sacrifices are probably now offered only extremely rarely. Georg Buschan, America section. English translation 12. The Pawnee that they danced for 4 days and as many nights before sacrificing a human being to their highest spirit, Triava, in order to obtain success in war and a good harvest from him. Photo: George Wharton James. Figure 174. Interior of a Pueblo house. It contains baskets of field produce, beautifully decorated water jars, and a grain mill at which the woman in the background is working. On the wall hangs a home-woven sack with symbolic designs. Dances, however, are not the only religious acts by which the Indians approach their higher powers. The Navajo, for example, dance little. Instead, they have their priests address prayers to the gods and sing devout songs to them. And they also offer them ornaments of beads or feathers, as well as cigarettes, which they paint with prescribed patterns. Their most peculiar form of worship, however, consists in the making of sacred pictures in sand, which they spread on the floor of their medicine lodges. In it they depict images of the gods, according to traditional patterns, by scattering powders of different colors over the smooth sand. In addition, flower pollen or cornmeal is scattered over these figures as an offering. In cases of illness, pinches of the sacred sand are administered as medicine. For a lame foot, for example, some of the sand forming the feet is used. For a headache, sand from the head of the divine image, and so forth. Whatever remains of the picture is then swept outside. During their acts of worship, the Pueblo Indians blow little tufts of down into the air, so that they may rise upward together with their prayers. Photo: C.C. Pierce. Figure 175. Pueblo Indian woman. She carries an olla on her head, a porous water vessel of native manufacture weighing about 40 pounds. The woolen skirt and buckskin moccasins are likewise native work, while the cotton blouse and headscarf are industrial products. Photo: George Wharton James. Figure 176. A Hopi girl, recognizable by the round rolls of hair, the signs of virginity, on both sides of her head, with her mother, who as a married woman, wears her hair in long braids. The Hopi perform a particularly interesting dance, the snake dance. It takes place in August and each time lasts 9 days. Its principal site is Walpi, figure 173 and 186. Its participants are members of the snake and antelope fraternities, which evidently developed from former family clans into these extensive associations. The priests are consecrated for the work assigned to them in the kivas, or sacred chambers. These are rooms cut out of the sandstone rock and accessible only from above, by means of a trapdoor or ladder. Figure 187. Eagle feathers and weasel and skunk skins decorate the uppermost rung of the ladder. Colored sand is brought into the kivas, and much as among the Navajo, worked into an artistic mosaic of traditional patterns and religious meaning, to form altars and images. Figure 189. Sacred emblems and fetishes are placed around the altars, thus erected. In addition, a magic drink is brewed from herbs, honey, and corn pollen, and a consecrated pipe is smoked with great solemnity toward the 6 directions. The Hopi count 6 of these: northwest, southwest, southeast, northeast, zenith, and nadir. A particular color and deity are assigned to each direction. Georg Buschan, America section, English translation 13. The festivities, figures 190 and 191, are introduced by the hunting of snakes. At the beginning, the snake priests appear wearing only a loincloth and moccasins with their hair loose. They are equipped with a snake brush, 166, consisting of 1 or 2 eagle feathers on a handle, a long digging stick or hoe, and a leather bag. Every snake except water snakes is searched out. If they encounter a venomous one, they stroke it with the snake brush. This seems to exercise a kind of hypnotic effect on the animal, for it then remains quiet. They then seize the snake by the neck with one hand, or if this is not possible, by the tail, quickly slide the other hand up to the neck, and put it into the bag. When the bags are full, the priests bring them to the kiva, where skilled hands place the snakes in large earthen vessels. Here they remain for the rest of the festival days. The priests bathe them in sacred water, roll them in sacred cornmeal, and roll them together with the fetishes in the sand mosaic of the altar. A major role in the festivities is also played by the bahos, or prayer sticks. These are brightly colored feathered sticks or small boards of varying length, from a few centimeters to half a meter, according to their purpose, which are found everywhere, often arranged in groups, sometimes near villages, sometimes in the open fields, in rock crevices, or in drifting sand. The bahos are of great importance in Pueblo life. They are most frequently found very close to the settlements, where they lie on a structure up to about a meter high, a kind of altar, beside offerings of the usual sort, including river pebbles, oddly shaped stone nodules, pieces of petrified wood, and worn-out and broken stone implements. At a greater distance from the villages, bahos are set up in niches in the rock. As stated, the bahos are sticks or little boards made from particular kinds of wood, painted in bright colors and furnished with certain herbs, bird feathers, cotton, and a little pouch of corn leaf, filled with meal or honey, as food for the baho. Their manufacture takes place under prescribed formalities, smoking before and after making them, and reciting prayers. These prayer sticks are supposed to represent a combination of symbols, the detailed interpretation of which is often uncertain, and after they are consecrated, they serve as intermediaries between the faithful and the gods. The nature of the baho is, first, a confirmation or embodiment of spoken prayer, further, a symbolic prayer, and finally also an act of homage to the gods, or an offering to them. Often 2 bahos are tied together. They then symbolize man and woman. During the Hopi snake dance, such prayer sticks are set up on the altar, after which prayers are recited continuously, and other solemn rites are performed throughout all 9 days. Priests and snakes live together in the kiva day and night. On the 6th day, in the kiva of the Antelope Society, a mystery play is performed concerning the origin of the snake fraternity. For this purpose, a young man of the snake fraternity and a young woman of the antelope fraternity are chosen and specially adorned. The latter is given a consecrated emblem of corn to hold in her hand. Both take their places before the altar. The antelope chief opens the solemn rite with a prayer in which he pleads for abundant rain for the crops and for a good harvest. 16 traditional songs are then performed, their theme being the legend of the origin of the snake clan. According to this legend, in ancient times, a Hopi youth named Tio went one day to the edge of the Grand Canyon, and there saw the roaring waters of the great Colorado River. He built himself an ark and traveled down the river until he reached the Salt Lake and landed on an island in it. There he met Spider-Woman, who is also the Earth Goddess. Georg Buschan, America section, English translation 14. Friendly to him and led him over the lake on a rainbow bridge into another land, and there into a snake kiva. Snake skins hung on the wall there, and the people were, like Tio himself, red Indians. But when he was told to look around, these people had suddenly put on the snake skins and looked like snakes. Spider-Woman then helped our hero win from these snakes a girl named Tiuamana as his bride, and made it easier for both of them to return home. Only after many adventures, however, did the pair arrive safely in the homeland of the Hopi youth. From this couple sprang the Hopi snake clan, and for that reason the people can handle wild snakes without fear, as though they were their brothers, and induce them to carry their prayers for rain into the spirit world. Photo Dr. N. Leon, Figure 177, Zapotec woman. Before the time of Columbus, the Zapotec formed a powerful people of high culture. Today they are still fairly numerous in Oaxaca. Noteworthy are the strips of cloth braided into the hair, which form the woman's headdress. Photo George Wharton James, Figure 178, Distribution of offerings to the people at Acoma, New Mexico. On St. Stephen's Day, the Christianized Indians at Acoma bring all sorts of gifts to their patron saint. For example, peaches, melons, grains, chili peppers, and bread. During the course of the day, these gifts are gradually distributed among the assembled crowd. Numerous other formalities are practiced by the various Indian tribes in order to make their fields fertile. Usually, however, it is by means of masked dances that they pursue this purpose. The Iroquois perform such dances in January as so-called New Year dances. The masks, Figure 193, worn on these occasions are generally made of wood and are said in some cases to have been in use for 20 to 100 years. They demand tobacco as an offering and are angry if no one dances with them. They resemble human faces with a wide-open, broad or funnel-shaped mouth, are usually made of wood, and wear a wig of horsetail hair, a strip of buffalo hide, a braid of corn husks, and other such things. There can be little doubt that they are intended to represent vegetation demons. The dancers who wear them are dressed in costumes of torn clothing or corn husks, and have various bulky objects fitted beneath them, so that they look like cripples or deformed persons. They also carry a rattle and clubs in their hands. One such masked dance is described by an eyewitness as follows. The dancers appeared before the council house, where the men had assembled, and struck the walls of the house with their rattles and clubs, while making strangely grunting cries. The blows grew ever more violent, and the noise increasingly deafening. Suddenly the door flew open, and the dancers appeared. But they crawled in on all fours, twisting themselves like cripples, and shaking their rattles and sticks along the floor. Only in the middle of the room did they stand upright. The dance lasted only a short time, after which the dancers wandered about the council house as they pleased, staring at the women through their masks and frightening the children. From time to time the leader of the celebration called one or another of them forward, gave him some tobacco. Tobacco had already been distributed among all the participants before the dance, apparently as an offering, and asked him to perform another dance of a particular kind, imitate various animals, or mimic skaters, locomotives, and the like. This gave rise to rather coarse and suggestive jokes. Georg Buschan, America section, English translation 15, photo George Wharton James, Figure 179, John's Day among the Taos Pueblos, New Mexico, celebrated festively with processions. The Zuni have a peculiar rain ceremony, performed around the summer solstice by a special priestly society, the Ten Koi Iamashi, in the form of demons, some wearing animal-like masks. They line up in a row, singing the words Dumi Chimchi-ah, and move half walking, half trotting, beneath the eaves of the houses, through all the lanes, and around the outer walls of the village. Each man rests his hands on the hips of the man in front of him. The leader of the procession rests his own hands on his knees. Thus the people move slightly bent forward, and apart from a coarse, rough, dark blue cloth around the loins, are naked. As this comic procession moves beneath the projecting roofs of the houses, women stand above with jars full of water, not always of the cleanest quality, and pour it over the heads and bodies of the men. Sometimes, before the procession arrives, while the women are waiting for it, a little water is scooped from the jar with the hand and poured out. According to Fuchs, to whom we owe this description, this is probably a kind of offering. The members of the procession try in every way to become as wet as possible, and seem all the more satisfied the more thoroughly they are soaked. Throughout the entire performance, only the words quoted above are repeated. Evidently, the participants represent vegetation demons, standing for the crops and receiving the fertilizing moisture in their place. The Zuni priests of the Koi Iamashi also take part in the sacred dances, the Korkakshi dances, which likewise have the purpose of obtaining rain and a good harvest. Together with the Koko, the principal dancers, they enter the village and engage in all kinds of jokes, mostly suggestive in character, which visibly give the spectators great pleasure. Although these indecent performances have nothing directly to do with the immediate purpose of the celebration, they certainly do not lack a deeper meaning. The motions resembling sexual intercourse that are usually performed are intended to symbolize fertilization. The Moki, another Pueblo tribe, know similar religious dances intended to promote plant growth, the Inakachina, in which the performers appear masked. One of these dancers, representing the vegetation demon Kokopelli, is equipped with an enormous phallus and a bird-like beak. Photo R.B. Townshend. Figure 180. Indian Devil. Wooden figure with movable joints. Skeena River, British Columbia. The brief sketch given above of the religious ideas of the North American Indians is far from an exhaustive account of these conditions. They are much too complicated and too varied to be dealt with in a few pages. It should, however, suffice to give an approximate overview. In connection with this, a few words may also be devoted to the totem and clan system of the hunting and fishing Indians of the Northwest. Among them, each tribe is divided into a series of matriarchal clans or kin groups, each with a fixed totem. By a totem is meant a particular animal, much more rarely a plant, with which its possessor believes himself to stand in a relationship of kinship, insofar as he regards it as his ancestor. Images of the totem, most commonly a bear, wolf, eagle, raven, beaver, or whale, are applied to every imaginable object of use, tool, boat, house, and so forth, either in painting or in relief, and are even tattooed onto the body. Georg Buschan, America section, English translation 16. In front of the houses of chiefs, enormous split cedar trunks, up to 20 meters or more in height, are erected and covered on their rounded side with all kinds of animals carved in relief, the so-called totem or heraldic poles. Figure 192. These representations refer to the supposed ancestor and to the various totem animals from the legends of the clan. The uppermost image represents the totem animal of the owner, and the one below it, that of his wife. The legend of the clan also finds expression in dramatic performances by the tribes. Clans that possess the same totem are regarded as related to one another, even if they belong to different tribes. Their members may not marry among themselves, but only form unions with members of other clans. The child belongs to the mother's lineage, matriarchy. Photo Underwood and Underwood. Figure 181. A Hopi priest in the costume of a Kachina dancer. The Kachina dance is performed in honor of the ancestors. The mask with the high superstructure is characteristic of this dance. The loincloth has symbolic meaning. In his right hand, the dancer carries a gourd rattle. Photo, Dr. N. Leon. Figure 182. Scene from a ceremonial dance of the Totonac from the Papantla district in the state of Veracruz, eastern Mexico. Symbolism occupies a broad place in the religious customs of this people. In addition to its heraldic animal, each clan possesses a number of personal guardian deities or demons that grant particular gifts or abilities to members who have been initiated into their secrets, such as the ability to be invulnerable, to eat human flesh, and the like. These persons form secret societies and, especially in winter, perform masked dances in which the acquisition of the demon and the powers obtained through him are dramatically represented. Religion has little to do with these secret societies, since there is no actual worship of the guardian demons. The most distinguished of the numerous secret societies is that of the Hametsan. Hamatsa means man-eater, whose members in fact still practice cannibalism. At initiation, the candidate must bite the first person he meets in the arm and suck blood from the wound. In former times, the Hametsan ate slaves. Today, according to the source, they eat dried corpses that have been exposed for 1 or 2 years in wooden boxes placed in trees. The flesh is softened in water, stripped from the bones, and then eaten. Photo George Wharton James. Figure 183. Preparations for the flute ceremony at an altar. One of the participants carries a symbol of the sun. At the lower end of the steps, a pair of parents are occupied in adorning their daughter, while a smaller unclothed child looks on. We cannot close the description of the barbarous customs among the North American Indians without also mentioning scalping, the removal of the scalp of slain enemies as a sign of victory, a practice with which Europeans first became acquainted in the year 1520 under Francisco de Garay, during his unfortunate expedition to Panuco. Scalping, the name is taken from English. Scalp originally means shell or skullcap, was customary among numerous North American tribes, though not all, and also among individual South American Indian tribes in the Chaco and Guyana. It seems to have originated in the regions around the Gulf of Mexico, especially Florida. Since the discovery of the new continent, Europeans contributed not a little to its spread. As Friederici established, their firearms made wars much more Georg Buschan, America section English translation. 17. Deadly, their steel knives made scalping considerably easier, and the offering of rewards for bringing in scalps greatly increased the desire to obtain them. All this produced an enormous expansion of scalp hunting. Friederici further demonstrated that scalping arose from headhunting, which had formerly been practiced very extensively. The original skull trophy was transformed into a scalp trophy because the greatly increased number of captured heads, resulting from easier opportunities and greater demand, made their transport over difficult roads and long distances very troublesome. The idea therefore arose of being satisfied with the removed skin of the head, for according to the view of the Indians, as among so-called primitive peoples generally, not only is a part of the body equivalent to the body as a whole, but a part of a part is equivalent to the complete part. The motives that gave rise to scalp hunting were varied. They were much the same as those already encountered elsewhere in connection with headhunting. The desire for fame and honor through bringing home this sign of bravery, the belief in secret powers that one hoped to appropriate by taking the head or scalp of an enemy, and finally, the desire for revenge. The method of removing the scalp varied according to the way the victim wore the hair. In spite of the numerous hairstyles of the Indians, Friederici distinguished two principal forms. In one, the scalp lock lay in the middle of the head, in which case there was only one scalp. In the other, the hair of the head was divided by partings or by two or more braided plaits into several sections, which led to the division of the scalp into several separate trophies. To take possession of his victory trophy in the first case, the Indian placed a foot or knee on the chest, neck, or back of the victim lying on the ground, seized the hair with his left hand and pulled it tight, while his right hand drew a circle around the head with a knife above or below the ears. With some skill, the entire removal, in which the teeth, a cord, or the bowstring were sometimes used to assist, was carried out in scarcely 1 or 2 minutes. A scalp obtained in this way was comparatively large, and to be genuine had to include the crown of the head. If the hair was divided, a handful of hair or one of the braids was grasped, the skin lifted, and the knife passed beneath it. In this way several scalps, or a multi-part scalp, were obtained. The victor generally held the bloody trophy aloft with loud howling, and then fastened it to his belt. The Indians were so eager to obtain scalps that they spared no effort and no distance in order to gain possession of the prized object. During pregnancy, there are also, as probably everywhere among so-called primitive peoples, certain rules that the Indian woman must follow so that the child will suffer no harm, though among the North American tribes these seem no longer to be as strict as among the South American. Indian women of Canada eat very little during pregnancy, and Utah Indian women actually fast during the final weeks before childbirth. Among the Tena Indians of Alaska, from the 3rd month onward, the pregnant woman must interrupt her sleep 2 or 3 times every night for about half an hour, and spend this period sitting on her bed. During the day, she must also engage in much physical activity, especially chopping wood, which is supposed to make the birth easier. If, during labor, the woman passes stool or urine beneath herself, this is regarded as an evil omen for the child. In this case, they prefer to kill the newborn immediately by suffocating it beneath the afterbirth. The Tena Indians generally wrap the afterbirth in a bundle, dry it, and hang it from a tree in the forest, where it is left to its fate. Only when a woman wishes to have no more children does she bury the placenta in the earth and allow it to decay there. The remedy is said to work still better if she first tears it into about a dozen pieces. Any meconium present is left on the palms of the child's hands, because it is believed that this was its food in the mother's womb, and that, if this rule is observed, the child will always have plenty to eat later in life. If the firstborn is a girl, the Tena regard this as an evil sign. After the birth, both parents must take care for 2 or 3 days not to handle any sharp tool, axe, knife, saw, and the like, because it is feared that in doing so they might accidentally cut the child's supposed thread of life. During this period, neighboring women and good friends therefore fetch wood from the forest for the parents, and saw and split it as well. Photo, Underwood and Underwood. Figure 184. Mask for the Hopi Kachina dance. This dance is held between January and July in honor of the ancestral spirits and lesser deities. It is believed that after the celebration the spirits leave the place and return to their dwellings in Shipapu. Photo, R.B. Townshend. Figure 185. Mask intended to represent the face of a sorceress. The size of the plug in the lower lip indicates that she had many children. The umbilical cord is often simply bitten through, but it is also cut. Formerly, stone knives were used exclusively for this purpose. The Cherokee bury the umbilical cord of girls beneath a corn mortar, so that the child will become a capable bread maker, while that of boys is hung on a tree in the forest, so that they will develop into good hunters. The Kiowas sew the umbilical cords of girls into small beaded pouches, which are later worn by them at the belt and, after their death, placed on a stick on the grave. The Cheyenne put the carefully folded umbilical cord into a box or bag that also contains garments and ornaments, and maintain that the child will find no peace until it has discovered its umbilical cord inside. Photo, Underwood and Underwood, Figure 186, a sandstone rock about 15 feet high at Walpi, around which the Hopi march during the snake dance ceremony, carrying snakes in their mouths. Among many North American Indian tribes, the newborn child is immediately immersed in cold water, even in the severest cold, which generally seems to agree with it well. Afterward, it is in some places rubbed with oil, butter, and paint. This is supposed to make the skin more resistant to the weather. Twins are in various places regarded as bringers of good fortune. The Dakota consider them supernatural beings originating in another world, the land of twins, and therefore treat them with special care. The Nootka Indians of Vancouver associate twins with salmon, and regard a twin birth as a favorable omen for a plentiful salmon year. The parents build a small hut away from the village, beside a river in the forest, and set up around it wooden images and masks representing birds and fish. There they must remain separated from their fellow tribespeople for 2 years. The father must purify himself by bathing for an entire year and paint his face red. While bathing, he must sing particular songs used only for this purpose, containing praise of the salmon and an invitation to them to come and see the twins. When the animals hear this song and see the numerous masks, they are believed to come in great shoals. Thus, the birth of twins is taken as a sign of a good salmon year. Georg Buschan, America section, English translation, 19. It does, however, sometimes happen that the hoped-for shoals of salmon fail to appear. This is then regarded as a warning that the twins should be killed. Twins are forbidden to catch salmon. They may neither eat fresh salmon nor even touch it. Likewise, the parents may neither eat nor touch salmon during the period of their isolation. Special powers are attributed to twins. For example, the ability to make good or bad weather. To produce rain, they fill a small basket with water and sprinkle it into the air. To make good weather, they swing a piece of wood attached by a cord to a stick. And to produce a storm, they scatter the tips of branches down from a tree. As long as twins are still children, the mother can supposedly tell from their play whether her husband will return successfully from his hunt. If they strike or bite one another while playing, the man will be favored with luck on his excursion. If they remain quiet, he will return empty-handed. Similar ideas concerning the significance of twins occur among other North American Indian tribes. Photo, George Wharton James, Figure 187, scene from the snake dance at Walpi. The priest descends a ladder into the snake kiva. Eagle feathers and the skins of weasel and skunk hang from a structure erected above it. In front lie hoes and digging sticks, used not only in agriculture, but also for catching snakes. Abortion is fairly widespread among the Indians, with the result, according to the author, that many tribes are close to extinction. The reasons that lead women to interrupt pregnancy by artificial means are much the same as those already encountered elsewhere: fear of excessive burden and additional work from a large family, anxiety about food, concern on the part of women that too many children will cause them to lose their beauty and age prematurely, the rule found in some places requiring abstinence from sexual intercourse throughout the period of nursing, which may last a considerable time, and, among unmarried girls, fear of disgrace, among other motives. Among Crow and Assiniboine women, abortion is performed in a peculiar way. The pregnant woman has her abdomen vigorously kneaded, or rolls herself over a small stake stuck into the earth. She may also stretch herself out on the ground, place a board across her abdomen, and have her friends jump up and down on it until the fetus is expelled. The abandonment of newborn children because of lack of food is also customary among a number of Indian tribes. The Indian mother generally nurses her children for a fairly long time, usually 2 to 3 years. but periods of 6 or 7 years are not uncommon. The Ojibwa and other North American tribes hold a special religious ceremony at the birth of a child. The child, parents, and relatives gather with the medicine men in the temple wigwam. The latter dance around and make a great noise with their drums and calabashes, while the child lies in the middle of the room. At the end of this ceremony, they give the father magical remedies and amulets that are supposed to be valuable for the child's prosperity, especially as protection against illness. Photo, George Wharton James. Figure 188. Flute dance of the Hopi, which alternates annually with the snake dance. It lasts 9 days and is intended to dispose the gods favorably toward the harvest. A priest leads a procession of women to a shrine. As a rule, the Indians give their children a name immediately after birth, or only a short time afterward, though sometimes not until weaning. The original name is also occasionally Georg Buschan, America section, English translation 20 changed. For example, on reaching maturity, after an unusual event, or because of particularly outstanding qualities of the person concerned. The name given to the child is determined either by fixed rules in a prescribed succession, or by the names of certain animals, parts of animals, or their qualities, such as red fox, white marten, and so forth. The Fox Indians give their children names related to the father's clan. If the clan is associated, for example, with the eagle, the children receive names such as Gray Eagle, Hawk, Great Feather, Great Beak, and so on. Photo, George Wharton James. Figure 189. Antelope altar in an antelope kiva at Walpi. It consists of figures ceremonially composed of brown, red, white, yellow, green, and black sand. The zigzag lines represent rain-bringing lightning. Around the altar stand symbols, fetishes, bahos, 2 prayer sticks connected with one another by a bundle of feathers, vessels containing consecrated meal, rattles, and similar objects. The practice of deforming children's skulls is very widespread among the North American Indians. Often enough, however, this is not intentional, but results from the peculiar form of the cradles in which the women place their infants and keep them constantly. Most of these cradles are small boards hollowed out like troughs, upon which the child is tied firmly in an outstretched position with straps or cords. One of these cross straps is commonly passed across the forehead, or over a pad resting upon it, while a cushion of grass, or even a triangular block with an upright edge, serves as a support for the child's neck. The mother generally carries the child tightly bound into such a cradle with her, wearing it on her back by a strap passing around her own forehead or by shoulder straps. While working, she places the cradle with the child beside her, or hangs it from the nearest tree. At home, she stands it against a post of the hut. In any case, the child is continually kept in an upright position, and so that it will not slip is tightly bound. The mother usually removes it from these bindings only for short periods. It is easy to see that such an arrangement must also influence the form of the child's head, especially when, as protection against the rays of the sun, it is given a hard canopy that is likewise pressed firmly against the skull. The resulting form makes the head appear compressed and flattened from front to back, and extended upward in wedge-like fashion. In some cases, such deformation is even deliberately assisted. At least it is reported of a number of North American tribes, for example the Chinook, Natchez, Creek, Muskogee, Athabascan, and others, that they tighten the bands around the head more and more from time to time. One Salish tribe among whom cranial deformation was especially conspicuous was formerly called the Flatheads by Europeans for this reason. Photo, George Wharton James. Figure 190. Scene from the Hopi snake dance. It is nearing its end. The collectors, with bundles of snakes in their hands, are preparing to go to the dance rock. The spectators consist of Navajos and white people. The Indians generally treat their children kindly, partly because they tend to be good-natured by disposition, and partly deliberately, in order to prevent the spirit of future warriors from being intimidated and their strength of will broken. Indian children therefore become independent, mischievous, and disobedient toward their parents at a very early age. Like our children, they engage in games. The girls like dolls. Such dolls have already been. Georg Buschan, America section, English translation. 21 found in prehistoric mounds, which they care for and rock in cradles, just as our girls do. The boys play with balls and tops, bows and arrows, use the sling and so forth. Like all children, they are attracted to imitating the activities of adults, Often father and mother deliberately train them early for such occupations. Girls in cooking, lighting fires, and tending the tent or wigwam. Boys in the use of weapons, hunting, and riding. Among the Crow Indians, Irving saw riding taught as early as the 3rd year of life, as well as tracking and herding animals. Outdoor games involving movement are also very popular. Among the Choctaw, a communal game of men and boys was formerly much practiced in which the participants, blindfolded, swam across a broad river and tried to land at a particular point, or rolled down a hill wrapped in skins and blankets. Whoever first reached the appointed mark was the winner. One of the favorite games of Omaha children consists in 10 to 20 children lining up one behind another, boys under 8 naked, except for a cord tied around their supple little bodies, and girls wearing a short skirt. Each child grasps the belt of the one in front, and all trot away waddling in single file to the rhythm of a song sung in gibberish. During the procession, which winds around trees and between tents, all kinds of small mischief is committed. For example, they watch for an opportunity to snatch an ear of corn from an old woman who is pounding maize. If she then tries to catch and punish the children, they scatter and seek shelter in some hiding place. A game very popular among the Chippewa Indians is a form of ball game in which the players do not strike with a wooden club, but catch the ball while running at full speed in a net braided from leather straps, about twice the size of the ball, and throw it back over the heads of the players. The opponent's task is to give the ball a different direction as quickly as possible. Sometimes the children also form a circle around the hearth fire in the hut, and grandfather tells them stories of old times or sings songs to them, to which they dance. Photo George Wharton James, figure 191, scene from the Hopi snake dance. The man in front carries a snake in his mouth and keeps his eyes closed. His neighbor guides him by placing a hand around his neck. Walking behind the two is the snake collector, with the snake whip made of eagle feathers. The next group is arranged in the same way. Young men approaching adulthood among the Indians are, or at least formerly were, subjected to tests of courage when they wish to be admitted to the circle of warriors. For this purpose, they either had to endure severe deprivation and even torture, being whipped with rods or thorns without uttering a sigh, fasting for a long time, wandering extensively without being allowed to rest, exposing themselves to the burning sun or bitter cold, or they had to demonstrate their agility and endurance in breaking young colts, shooting arrows, and throwing. If they passed these tests of courage, they were publicly declared warriors. Usually other solemn customs were associated with this. The novices, for example, had to perform dances throughout the entire night that had previously been taught to them by older men. Naturally, a feast generally concluded the ceremony. The following examples show how difficult it was made for young men to gain admission to the warrior class. Particularly horrifying were the torments among the Mandan. After the youth had fasted for 4 days and spent the nights without sleep, 2 men disguised in masks thrust a pointed knife with a jagged blade into the flesh at various places on his body. Georg Buschan, America section, English translation 22, and pushed pointed wooden pegs about the thickness of a finger into the wounds. Ropes were then fastened to these pegs, and the tortured youth, additionally weighed down by medicine bags, a shield, and several buffalo heads, was hoisted high enough that his feet no longer touched the ground. The suspended man was then spun around, slowly at first, and then faster and faster, until he lost consciousness. After 15 to 20 minutes he was lowered, and some of the pegs were removed from his chest and shoulders, while others were left in the body. But the torments were not yet exhausted. First, in honor of the Great Spirit, the youth's little finger, and sometimes his index finger as well, was chopped off. Then he was dragged without mercy at a wild run around the medicine lodge, still required to carry all the objects mentioned above. Finally, these objects were torn from him together with the pegs. As soon as consciousness returned, the unfortunate youth rose and crawled back to his wigwam, where his wounds were dressed. Among the Cheyenne, the torture was scarcely less severe. Incisions were likewise made beneath the boy's skin, straps were drawn through them, and with these the victim was tied to a post outside the village. There he was left to his fate. His task was then to free himself from the straps, drawn beneath the skin. Most boys endured for several days, until separation had loosened the skin enough for the bridges of flesh to tear easily. but one who was especially courageous would resolutely seize the straps with both hands and make sawing motions until after several hours he freed himself. A boy who rid himself of his bonds in this way earned the praise of all the men and was regarded as a likely future leader on the warpath. As soon as a boy had freed himself, he was escorted back to the camp with great honors and there carefully tended. While he had been fastened to the pole, he had been forced to endure great thirst in the heat. Women came very close with their water vessels, but none offered him water to quench his raging thirst. He was, however, entirely free to ask for water or to have the straps cut. His request would have been granted, but then he would have had to bear the consequences of his cowardly conduct. He would have been regarded not as a man, but as a squaw, a woman, would have had to perform women's work and wear women's clothing. On the other hand, he would not have been permitted to carry weapons, hunt, or go to war. A further consequence would have been that every girl would have refused to take such a weakling as her husband. These dishonoring consequences almost always sufficed to make the young men endure the cruel torture with Spartan fortitude. Townshend estimated at the time, about 40 years before the book was written, that the number of such male squaws scarcely exceeded 2 or 3 in the entire tribe. Indian girls, too, must submit to certain formalities on reaching puberty. Usually, during the first menstruation, they must withdraw to a special hut apart from the village and live there in complete seclusion. Only the mother or an old woman may visit them. Sometimes abstinence from food and drink also forms part of the preparation. Among some tribes, the girl's face is blackened, and an old broad-brimmed hat is placed on her head, so that she will not pollute the sky with her gaze, or she is dressed in an entire special costume. At the end of this confinement, which among the Kolosh and Tlingit formerly lasted almost a year, the girl is generally washed and given new clothing. Among the tribes just mentioned, her lower lip is pierced and, as a sign of maturity, a pin or plug is inserted in the opening. Festivals are usually also held in honor of the girl, at which there is abundant eating. Among the Muskogee, for example, such a feast includes roasted dog, a soup of turkey, chicken, beef, and pork, beans, potatoes, and maize, as well as cakes made from cherries, ground cherry stones and tallow, maple sugar, wheat and cornbread, dried plums, and a mixture of ox gall and sugar water. In many places, dances are also held to celebrate the event, and the entire neighborhood is invited both to the dance and the feast. Among the Hupa, this dance is called Kin Alktha, or maiden dance. It is danced by the men with the girl, while the women take part only through accompanying song. For 9 evenings, the men dance without the girl, who must remain hidden from them. On the 10th night, 2 young men and 2 old women from the kin group come to the hut to search for the maiden and bring her out. The young men pull over her head a mask of leather and reeds resembling a sea lion, and take the girl between them. The old women place themselves to her right and left. Thus, all 5 go to the assembled men and women. The girl walks forward and backward 10 times, raises her hands to shoulder height, and begins a song. The last time she makes a high jump. At the end, she is greeted by the assembly with loud cries. Among the Wintun, after the maiden has prepared herself properly, and among other things, eaten a specially prepared sacred soup, she must, each time new guests arrive from outside, dance down the hill on which they appear and around the camp while singing sensual love songs. As soon as all participants in the festival have assembled, which may take 2 or 3 days, they unite in a great dance, which is actually less a dance than a procession around the village accompanied by choral songs. At the conclusion of the entire celebration, the chief takes the girl by the hand and dances with her along the whole line of festival participants, who improvise songs as they go. These songs are sometimes quite suggestive. Soto, Thurl, and Miller, Figure 192, Totem Poles of the Indians of British Columbia. These emblems erected in front of the huts are decorated with finely worked and splendidly painted carvings, representing the owner's totem and illustrating the mythological stories of his tribe. The moral ideas of the North American Indians do not appear in general to stand at a high level, at least no longer at the present time. Of some tribes, it is reported that formerly they valued a chaste and virtuous life among unmarried girls, including the Mandan, Chippewa, Pueblos, and Pima. Of others, however, it is said that even at a very young age, they gave themselves to a sexually free life, and that premarital relations among girls were not regarded as disgraceful, though their possible consequences were. Methods were understood, however, by which such consequences could be prevented. In some places, it is even said to have been customary among the Athabascan, Nehewee, and Oregon Indians for brother and sister, as well as father and daughter, to have sexual relations with one another. Among the Nadawesi, a Sioux tribe, the young women willingly gave themselves to men on the occasion of the rice festival, and indeed took pride in having had relations with as many as possible on that day. Among some Indian tribes, it was regarded as an act of friendship to exchange wives with one another. Georg Buschan, America section, English translation 24. Photo, Underwood and Underwood, figure 193, Indian wooden masks. We have already mentioned the fact that among the Cheyenne young men who proved cowardly in the trial of maturity were put into women's clothing and treated as women. Such man-women are by no means a rare phenomenon among Indian tribes. Writers of the 16th and 17th centuries already reported them, and added that they often served for the sexual satisfaction of men, and, under certain circumstances, were deliberately raised for this role. More recent explorers encountered such persons among almost all North American tribes. They are said often to be distinguishable by a type of their own that reveals little masculinity. In addition, they wear women's clothing, adopt feminine behavior, some dress themselves almost like dandies, and perform women's work, while avoiding male occupations entirely. Thus, they never go hunting or on the warpath. Some of them are said to display great skill in carrying out women's duties. Of the Chippewa, it is told that these Igoquas were formerly married to men. Something similar is reported of the Acachemen of California. The author interprets many of these man-women as young people with what he calls a sexually perverse disposition. Their unconventional sexual feelings, he suggests, may have been partly inborn and partly produced by upbringing. A number of tribes, he states, deliberately trained certain young people for such sexual roles. Quite peculiar is the manner in which, according to the source, the Pueblos of New Mexico make women of the persons concerned. The strongest man in the village is chosen to become a mujerado, and repeated masturbation is performed on him daily in order to produce extreme sexual excitability, which over time, through very frequent ejaculation, is said to lead to wasting of the reproductive glands. Eventually, the author claims, all capacity for erection disappears. Together with this artificial emasculation, changes are said to occur in the person's emotional life. The mujerado loses interest in his former occupations, and increasingly puts aside, physically and mentally, what the author defines as masculine traits. He dresses in women's fashion, at first avoids the men, and seeks the company of women, but finally, according to the account, has sexual relations with men. Photo, George Wharton James, figure 194, Rain Dance of the Zuni Indians, in which they wear masks. In the background can be seen their terraced houses of stone or sun-dried brick. Child betrothals are by no means rare among the North American Indian tribes. Children of the same age are not always promised to one another. There is a preference for betrothing young girls of 10 to 12 years to men who are already fully grown and able to support a family. Little is known of courtship by young men for their girls. Among the Blackfeet, the parents arrange the marriage, since it is not customary among them for unmarried girls to associate with men. As soon as the girl's parents have chosen a son-in-law, they make their proposal to him in the following way. The father suggests that his daughter should bring the young man's food to his hut. If he agrees, the girl does this for a whole month. During that time, the father instructs her in the duties she will have to fulfill as a wife. At the end of this period, a celebration takes place in the young man's hut, to which only relatives are invited. Mother and daughter bring the food as far as the door. The bride alone enters the tent, and without speaking a word, sits down at the right side of her future husband. She then distributes embroidered moccasins to all the guests. After this celebration, further gifts are exchanged. The girl's mother builds a new hut for the young couple and gives the son-in-law a new buckskin suit and her daughter woolen blankets, buffalo hide garments, and likewise a buckskin dress. Among the Blackfeet, the girl leaves her parental clan. The children are also counted as belonging to the husband's family. It is considered proper for the mother-in-law to visit her daughter only in the presence of the daughter's husband, since it would be very embarrassing to her if he were to appear unexpectedly. Should the son-in-law violate this custom, the matter could be made good only by presenting his mother-in-law with a horse. Where, exceptionally, a girl is permitted to choose her husband, there is a charming form of courtship. Young warriors who wish to marry wait wrapped in blankets in front of their wigwam until a girl comes by. A man who would like to have her throws the corner of his blanket over her head. If the girl does not approve of the suitor, she cries out and is immediately released, whereupon another tries his luck. The one who finds favor in the eyes of the young beauty is allowed to draw his blanket completely over her, after which the two go away together. The principal ceremony at a wedding consists in the giving of gifts. The young husband always presents gifts to the bride's parents, and he and his own parents generally receive return gifts from them, though this is also often omitted. Where the custom exists that gifts are given only by the bridegroom's side, marriage easily degenerates into a simple transaction of purchase and sale. If a young couple elopes, this at first brings disgrace upon the family, until the matter has been put right by gifts given afterward. A condition among probably all North American Indian tribes is that the man marry outside his clan, usually also outside his tribe. Marriages even occur outside one's own people. Polygamy is very widespread. Through the many wars the Indians fought over the course of time, many young men lost their lives. The result was that women came to outnumber men. Thus, plural marriage became in many cases a social necessity. Among the Chippewa, there is an order-like brotherhood whose members, once they have reached the 4th degree of the order, are said to be able to prepare a powder that acts as a powerful love charm. It consists of red pigment, powdered snake root, some blood from a girl who has menstruated for the first time, and a powdered piece of ginseng, which must be taken precisely from the place where the root divides into 2 branches, apparently an allusion to the human lower body with its 2 legs. Merely mixing these ingredients, however, does not yet make the love powder effective. It also requires an offering of tobacco to Kichi-Manado, accompanied by song and the sound of a magical rattle. To use the remedy successfully, one must place it beneath the sleeping place of the beloved person. Photo, H. J. Shepstone. Figure 195, Indian grave in a tree. The ideas of the North American Indians concerning illness and healing are closely connected with their religion, to such a degree that medicine is the traditional word for spiritual power, and the medicine man is far more priest and physician. His effectiveness depends on his ability to drive out the evil spirit that has caused an illness, and at the same time invoke the aid of good spirits, who can restore the sick person to health if they wish. Georg Buschan, America section, English translation 26. Although medicine men, in order to support belief in their art, outwardly employ all kinds of theatrical display, they are generally shrewd enough also to use genuine remedies, since their office carries considerable responsibility, and, under some circumstances, may even expose them to danger from the sick person's relatives. They will rarely fail, when their treatment proves unsuccessful, to give one of the numerous explanations for death that seem convincing to the people. Nevertheless, it does happen that the relatives place the blame on the medicine man, and as punishment, slaughter him together with his family. As soon as death has occurred, the Indians believe that the departed soul of the deceased has entered the spirit world that surrounds them everywhere. There are numerous ideas concerning where this other world is to be sought and what fate awaits the dead there. Generally speaking, the future life is imagined as resembling life on Earth, only under happier conditions. Rich hunting grounds and peaceful relations among the tribes play the principal role in this conception. The Navajo conception of the afterlife has already been discussed above. Buschan describes a Zuni funeral ceremony as follows. As soon as the dead person had taken his last breath, the women of his own clan bathed him and broke a vessel of water beside him. By this, they gave him back to the sun. 4 men then carried the body, wrapped in blankets, to the old burial place amid the lamentations of the women, and lowered it into the grave, while one of them, facing east, recited a prayer and scattered meal, food, and other gifts over it. 4 days later, with pleading prayers in the name of the dead, the mourners offered beautiful prayer sticks decorated with parrot feathers, which play a major role in their religious life. The funeral observance continued with 50 Zuni men, led by a painted and ornamented priest, followed by the torch-bearing fire god, setting off westward on a pilgrimage, as they said, to the city of Kaka, and to the home of our lost others. After 4 days they returned, carrying baskets of living turtles wrapped in soft blankets. A weary man brought a turtle into the governor's house and placed it on the ground, treating it with particular tenderness. The turtle, however, tried to escape as quickly as possible. The man's relatives followed the animal into every corner and crevice, prayed, and sprinkled it with cornmeal. When Cushing asked why they did not let the animal go, or at least give it some water to drink so that it would not die, the man slowly turned his gaze toward him, his face at once expressing grief, indignation, and pity, and replied, "I tell you it cannot die. Tomorrow it will only change its dwelling and return to the home of its brothers." He then turned again to the turtle and called to it with coaxing words, "Ah, my poor dear lost child, father or mother, my sister or my brother, whoever you were." At this he began to weep most movingly, his voice trembling with sobs. The women and children present joined in the lamentation. On the following day, the poor turtle was gently killed amid prayer and offerings. Its flesh and bones were given to the small river nearby, so that they might return to eternal life in the dark lake of the dead, and a sacred rattle was made from its shell. This peculiar custom is explained by a legend, according to which, when the people first came into this land, they had to cross a great river. And in crossing it, many women lost their children when the children slipped from their backs and were transformed into turtles. The expression "our lost others" refers to members of the tribe who in this way remained behind their relatives and prepared a home for them beyond the lake of the dead. Georg Buschan, America section, English translation 27. Photo, Dr. Arnold Heim. Figure 196. Indian Cemetery at Welselka. There are many forms of burial among the North American Indians. Sometimes the corpse is buried in the earth, figure 196, sometimes exposed in the air or placed in urns. Cremation also occurs. The most widespread custom was to dig a round hole and place the body vertically inside, wrapped in skins or cloth and tied with the legs folded one over the other. The pit was sometimes also lined with stones. If a grave was dug to the full length of the dead person, the corpse was usually laid horizontally on its back, though sometimes on its side, with the knees drawn up. In burial chambers it was not unusual for several bodies to be interred at the same time. It also happened that the corpse was laid on the earth, covered with a thick layer of clay, and a fire was lit over it, so that the clay hardened into a protective covering. This clay coffin was finally covered with earth. Some of the tribes of the southern Atlantic coast embalmed their dead so that they became mummies. On the Great Plains, bodies were often disposed of in the open air. The dead person was carefully wrapped in the cloth worn during life and laid upon a scaffold or bier. This was then placed in a tree, figure 195, or on a post above the ground, so that wolves and dogs could not reach it. The deceased was given his weapons, though in broken condition, so that he might use them in the next world, and was also supplied with food for the journey there. On the northern Pacific coast, seafaring Indians used a canoe as a coffin, and set it up on a post. Burial in urns was rare. Such cases are known only from Arizona, where earthen jars containing cremated remains have been found in burial grounds. The Navajo of Arizona, who have a strong aversion to contact with corpses, sometimes fastened ropes to the lower ends of the poles from which their winter houses were built, and pulled them down by means of the ropes, so that the whole house collapsed over the dead person and became his grave monument. Sometimes they also set fire to the whole structure and burned it down. From Denneker, Living Races of Mankind. Figure 197, a Hopi bride, whose entire costume consists of products of native weaving. The signs of mourning differed from tribe to tribe. Widespread expressions of grief included weeping and lamentation by relatives, tearing the clothing, and scattering ashes or dust over the head. Survivors also sometimes inflicted cuts on the face and limbs. The property of the deceased was often destroyed. Among the Dakota, the widow had to keep a fire burning on her husband's grave for 4 evenings. She also had to lament at sunrise and sunset, in some cases fast, and remain secluded from the outside world throughout the mourning period, the duration of which varied. When the period was over, the dead man's family equipped her anew, and she was then free to marry again. Among the Athabascan, who cremated their dead, the widow had to sit on the funeral pyre and remain there until she had been thoroughly scorched and the hair of her head had been burned away. Photo, C.B. Waite, figure 198. Public scribe, evangelista, as found in public squares throughout Mexico. Georg Buschan, America section, English translation. 28 Central America and the West Indian Islands. Central America. The highlands of Central America, extending between the Isthmus of Tehuantepec and that of Panama, are an ancient land of culture that underwent severe decline under Spanish misgovernment. They are inhabited by Nahua peoples, a language group that in ancient times migrated from an original homeland in more northerly regions, advanced as far as Guatemala, Pipil, San Salvador, and Nicaragua, and displaced the indigenous tribes that had previously lived there, such as the Totonac, Olmec, Tarascan, Otomi, Mixtec, Zapotec, and Maya. The Nahua peoples include, among others, the Aztecs and their predecessors, the Toltecs, who probably arrived in the 4th or 5th century. The Maya peoples, who likewise should probably not be regarded as the original inhabitants, developed a highly advanced culture, and the Aztecs brought an equally advanced one. Over time, the two cultures increasingly blended with one another and attained a very considerable flourishing. Both peoples formed well-organized states with monarchic, yet at the same time fairly democratic forms of government. The arts and sciences, no less than trade and industry, stood at a high level. Unfortunately, the space available does not permit a closer treatment of the remarkable cultural conditions of the ancient Mexicans. We must limit ourselves to describing modern conditions. Photo. C.B. Waite, Figure 199, a woman from Tehuantepec in ceremonial dress. The most striking parts of her costume are the skirt made of brightly colored fabrics, the sleeveless bodice, and the large starched ruff. The inhuman rule exercised by the Spaniards in Central America, from the discovery of the country into the beginning of the 19th century, contributed not only to the destruction of the original way of life of the population, their customs and usages, but also to the destruction of the tribes themselves. In remote regions beyond the reach of the conqueror's severity, the old Indian culture has survived comparatively pure, down to our own day. The close contact of the Spaniards with the Indians gradually produced a population in which the proportion of Indian blood is very considerable. In Mexico, great importance is attached to the degree of blood mixture, and there is consequently a whole series of terms for the different descendants, according to whether Indian or Negro blood flows in their veins, or whether Spanish blood has again been introduced into the mixed population in a later generation. If the father is a Spaniard and the mother an Indian woman, the descendants are called mestizos. Children of a union between a white person and a mestiza are called castizos. If a castiza has children with a Spaniard, their children are again regarded as Spaniards. Descendants of a Spaniard and a Negro woman are called mulattoes. From the union of such a mulatto with a Spaniard comes a Morisco. A Morisca with a Spaniard produces an albino, and only the children of such an albino with a Spaniard, called tornatras, are again regarded as Spaniards. Mixed descendants of an Indian and a Negro woman are called sobo. A sobo with a Negro woman produces a chino. The descendant of a China and an Indian is called cambujo. And finally, the offspring of an Indian and a mestiza is called coyote. The people are in general entirely uneducated and unable to read or write. Public scribes therefore conduct written business. Figure 198. Georg Buschan, America section, English translation 29. Actual whites, above all Spaniards who have remained entirely free of mixture with Indian blood, are few. By estimate, at most 1/6 of the Mexican population consists of such whites, among whom are also representatives of other peoples who immigrated partly as merchants and partly as adventurers. For the most part, these Europeans have completely adopted Spanish customs, while the Spaniards themselves have held fast to the usages of their homeland. Photo. C.B. Waite. Figure 200. Seen from a bullfight at the foot of Popocatépetl, the Smoking Mountain. Bullfights are a generally popular entertainment of the Mexican people. The Mexican Indian, who makes up about half of the country's population, differs from his North American brothers in that he has not, like them, devoted himself to warfare, but has become a peaceable farmer. His clothing varies with climatic conditions. Tropical heat prevails in the coastal regions, a more temperate climate in the mountain districts, and even cold at higher elevations. Yet the outstanding feature of Mexican dress is always the brilliance of its colors and the preference for ornament. Figure 199. The most important garment is the zarape, a multicolored blanket worn as a wrap, but also serving many other purposes, and the rebozo, a cotton strip several meters long, a shawl often richly patterned in blue, yellow, or violet. Wealthy women wear one made of silk, of such fineness that despite its width, it can be drawn through a finger ring. It is wrapped over the head and neck as protection from the sun and falls in graceful folds. Often, however, it is gathered together and then used to carry fruit and other things, much as our apron is used. The rebozo seems to have developed from the Spanish veil. On the bare body, Indian women also wear a shirt reaching to the ankles, often richly embroidered. Their head hair, to which they devote much care, is either braided with colored cords and wrapped around the head or allowed to hang down in plaits. People generally go barefoot throughout the country, though men often wear sandals of cord. Festival procession at a posada, a Christmas custom in Mexico. The participants knock at the door to ask for lodging for the two saints, Mary and Joseph. The Mexicans' principal entertainment consists of music, song, and dance. The jarabe may be regarded as the national dance. There are also mystical dances, a mingling of Aztec teaching and Christian religion, recalling the first period of the Spanish conquest. These are performed at particular seasons of the year by masked dancers, accompanied by drums and flutes, and vary in their details from place to place. In the far south, the Danza de la Conquista, which represents the Aztecs being overcome with fear at the arrival of the white man, is the most remarkable dance. The fiestas of the church, likewise the feast days of saints and the name days of relatives and friends, are celebrated by the population in a merry fashion. Dance, gambling, cockfighting, and bullfighting are the principal entertainments. The animal fights mentioned, Figs 200 and 201, as well as card-playing, baraja, are deeply rooted habits. Next to the cura, that is the village priest, and the curandera, the quack healer or village witch, the thing exerting the greatest influence on Mexican life is pulque, a national drink made from the agave. When the proper moment has arrived, this enormous aloe-like plant is cut and a honey-like liquid is obtained from it, which is left to ferment for 24 hours. Georg Buschan, America section, English translation 30. This produces a strongly smelling liquid whose consumption brings on heavy intoxication. Pulquerias, shops selling this drink, are found everywhere in the country, and the Mexican will spend his last centavo on it. They are also the places where a foreigner has the best opportunity to observe native life and activity. Photo, CB Wait, Figure 201. Cockfight, another widespread pastime in Mexico. The activity of Mexican Indians in the countryside is almost entirely absorbed by agriculture. The women make the simple objects needed for life. They show particular skill in producing woven and pottery wares, Figure 203. The religion, Figures 202, 204, and 205, of the Mexican is in name that of the Roman Catholic Church, but in reality, according to the author, a form of worship that in some respects is merely a continuation of the religion of the Aztecs and Maya. The government has officially abolished church processions, yet they still occur in the countryside, in small Indian villages consisting of bamboo huts with palm leaf roofs. They proceed in a very peculiar and incidentally very noisy fashion. Drummers and pipers open the procession of the faithful. All Mexicans, the author says, are very devout, who carry mysterious figures of colored paper on long poles. No one knows what these figures are supposed to mean. No one asks, just as no one knows what the prayers spoken in Latin mean. The researcher, however, recognizes that these strange figures come from the days of the ancestors of the present population before the European conquest. The same applies to consecrated offerings of flowers, which are laid at every roadside shrine. These have most likely taken the place of former pagan altars, in village churches and urban houses of worship. They recall the offerings to Quetzalcoatl, the human god of the ancient Aztecs. The natives' love of flowers is extraordinarily great. Besides the presentation of such offerings, it is expressed in the flower days, those magnificent festivals in April, on the Vico Canal near Mexico City. Then the Aztec chinampas, or floating gardens, are a single mass of blossoms, and Quetzalcoatl is openly honored as a god of nature. Photo, the Barrett Photo Agency. Figure 202, a female penitent during Lent, sliding on her knees up the holy mountain of Amacamica. Photo, J. Castanos Flores. Figure 203, pottery dealers in Mexico. Pottery making is an industry practiced throughout the country, especially by women. Its products reveal artistic ability. Another festival, celebrated every year with great ceremony for 8 days before Christmas, is the Posadas, or the lodging, so called in memory of the lodging sought by Mary and Joseph in Bethlehem. A family, or more generally a group of friends, joins together to give the posadas in turn, and chooses a particular house as the setting for the celebration. The house in question is festively prepared and decorated with moss and henno, a trailing hanging plant that must never be absent. Besides lanterns, The piñatas to be discussed immediately are hung from the ceiling and pillars. In the evening, by torchlight, and while singing the litany, the participants in the posada proceed to a particular room where lodging is requested for Mary and Joseph. See the R plate. When the answer is favorable, the organizers of the procession open the door and place wax figures of the two saints inside. The company then returns to the dining room and feasts and drinks throughout the night. This procedure is repeated on 8 successive evenings, usually alternating among the houses of the participants. On the 9th, the figure of the Savior as a child is added to the group, and on the following day, the piñata is broken. Originally a cooking pot, the piñata is in its Christmas form still nothing more than a pot, a large-bellied vessel containing small gifts, taking the place of our Christmas tree. Naturally, the pot is gilded on the outside, or, more often, fitted with the head of an animal or human being, and fantastically covered with costumes of tissue paper, fur coverings, ribbons, and bows. The children, blindfolded, and after being repeatedly turned around and misdirected in the courtyard of the house, as in our game of pot striking, must try to smash the piñata with a stick, figure 206, and then receive its contents, which usually consist of sweets. Church and magic are by no means opposed to one another in the thinking of the native population. Rather, one supplements the other. The Indian woman thinks there can be no harm in obtaining protection from both sides, and that the effect will therefore be stronger. The sign of the cross naturally protects against the evil eye, but so does the mysterious potion of the curandera, the village witch. Consequently, she uses both. If she should have reason to be jealous of her husband, her prayers to God and the saints will surely be made still more effective by the prescriptions supplied by the curandera. In general, the curandera enjoys very considerable power everywhere. She is constantly consulted, and great importance is attached to her directions. She also treats illnesses, and not infrequently does so successfully, since she is fairly well acquainted, to a certain degree, with the effects of medicinal plants, as her ancestors were before her. The mingling of religion and superstition appears very clearly even at the arrival of a new citizen of the world. First, of course, as the Church requires, the child must be baptized. Even if the parents are not married to one another, this is the father's first duty, one from which he probably never withdraws. In addition, however, the child is hung with all sorts of amulets intended to bring good fortune in later life. A knowledgeable person casts the horoscope, and magical formulas are spoken. The mother loves her child passionately, especially if it is a boy. She always carries it with her when traveling or working, fastened to her back by the rebozo. As soon as the child can speak, it must first learn a prayer, but before long, it is also made familiar with the traditions and legends of the people, and with other matters that are partly pagan and partly ecclesiastical. In this way, old Aztec traditions and legends are kept alive from generation to generation. Thodo, the exclusive news agency. Water carriers drawing water from a well that was blessed by the Church before Easter. The love life of the Mexicans begins very early and is not without the romance characteristic of the inhabitants of the mother country, Spain. By the age of 14, the average girl is already married, or at least has a lover. Such unions are generally not regarded as immoral. The Mexican, according to the author, is too much a cavalier to use the absence of a lawful marriage as a pretext for escaping any responsibility that might arise from it. A woman's life is spent in the field or in the household. She works the field and performs the housework. She spins thread from the agave and grinds the grain in order to bake tortillas, or flat cakes, the favorite food of the Mexican, at home. She washes the laundry on the riverbank, looks after the children, and goes to market both to buy and to sell. There she squats in an extremely simple stall, beneath a mat supported on 4 posts as protection against the burning sun, and sings out her wares, which are arranged on a second mat spread on the ground in front of her. The husband, meanwhile, does nothing. He lounges about and constantly smokes cigarettes. In addition, he diligently visits the pulquerias, where a red flag tells him when fresh pulque is available. Otherwise, he lives as carefree a life as his better half and takes life lightly. Photo: Underwood and Underwood, figure 205, the burning of Judas, the most important event during Holy Week in Mexico. At a given signal, rockets and fires blaze up in all the squares, in the midst of which figures representing the betrayer have been set up. Judas is regarded as the embodiment of the evil spirit. Death casts only a temporary shadow over this delight in life. Among the poorer classes, the coffin is often rented for the burial. It is only a light container, since in general the bones of the dead are permitted to remain in the earth for only a few years, unless special payments are made to the church. Yet a mass must always be read, and floral offerings, in place of the candles usually used elsewhere, must be presented. An outward display of mourning through black or purple garments is also customary. In remote Indian villages that have been little affected since the days of the conquest, the inhabitants appear still to practice old Aztec customs at burial. They even sacrifice dogs, chickens, and other animals. The curandera carries this out in some mysterious and probably also unpleasant manner in order to render the ever-feared evil eye harmless. Figure 206. Breaking the piñata, Mexican Christmas custom. The West Indies or Antilles consist of many hundreds of islands, together with several thousand smaller and smallest islets, all of very different sizes. Cuba and Haiti are the largest among them. At the time of the Spanish discovery of the West Indies, the population consisted of two elements that must have settled the island world from the mainland at very different times, the Arawak and the Carib. The former seem to have arrived first. When this happened can no longer be established, but certainly a long time before Columbus. The Caribs appeared much later, according to some researchers perhaps only shortly before European occupation. Arawaks and Caribs apparently came from South America, from the headwaters of the Xingu. The former were peaceful immigrants, while the latter were a very warlike people, beside whom the author says even the Spaniards, notorious for cruelty, would have seemed mild. Today, this original Indian population has completely disappeared, except for a few remnants, for example at Parati Point in Jamaica, on Santo Domingo, St. Vincent, and Trinidad. The Spaniards exterminated them. In their place came Negroes, Fig 207 and 208, imported as slaves from Africa from the 16th through the 19th century. These now emancipated Negroes, together with mulattoes and Creoles, form the principal part of the West Indian population. The white population forms a small minority. On Haiti and Santo Domingo, it is almost entirely absent. On the first mentioned island, only a few white families live in Port-au-Prince. The money-lending class in the Haitian towns are Syrians, whom the people incorrectly call Egyptians. East Indians were brought to Jamaica as indentured laborers. With their own secular and religious customs, the already colorful picture of the West Indies becomes still more varied. The larger islands also contain a more or less considerable number of Chinese, employed chiefly in laundries, but also engaged in other trades that, though quite profitable, the author describes as questionable. Photo, H. H. Johnston. Figure 207, Negro woman of Barbados. The black population of the West Indies places great value on bright colors in clothing. The Negroes of the West Indies, with whom the following discussion will deal exclusively, are described as remaining on the same level of superstition as their ancestors in their West African homeland, especially the Congo region. On those larger islands where whites established a firm administration, such beliefs were kept somewhat in check. On islands where black people themselves govern, especially Haiti, the author says they flourish all the more strongly. The mildest form of fetish worship, figure 210, is found in Jamaica, where the Negroes profess Christianity in name. Outwardly, they may follow Christian teaching, but the author claims that inwardly, an ineradicable African instinct remains. This finds expression in fetish practices and the use of magical remedies intended to defeat the schemes and plots of evil spirits. According to the tradition of the Negroes of Jamaica, every person has two spirits, one good and one evil. The good spirit returns after death to the African homeland. Relatives and friends of the deceased therefore entrust it with messages to carry across the sea. The evil spirit, on the other hand, remains in the grave with the corpse and emerges at night in the form of a duppy, figure 209. These duppies are believed to be most active at the two decisive moments of human life, when a person enters the world and when he leaves it. Special precautions are therefore taken in both cases to frustrate the designs of the evil spirits. The neck of a newborn is immediately encircled with a necklace of green beads, perhaps connected with worship of the green serpent. An opened pair of scissors forming an X and a Bible are also placed beneath the child's pillow. Before the 9th day, the child may not leave the house, lest a duppy seize it. If someone dies, all water standing nearby is immediately poured away, since otherwise a duppy might take up residence in it. At the same time, rum and food are placed at the duppy's disposal in order to appease it and satisfy its hunger and thirst. Magic may also be employed against duppies. Tariana Indians from the Rio Negro, Brazil, after a painting by Professor Wilhelm Reichart in the Museum of Ethnology, Berlin. Photo: The Exclusive News Agency. Figure 208. Negro women of Jamaica, wearing their festive dress for Christmas. The task of vigorously combating the harmful influence of the duppy belongs to the Obeah man, to whom special knowledge and abilities are attributed. In practicing his art, the Obeah man proceeds according to traditional Kabbalistic signs and mysterious magical formulas. He also concerns himself with catching duppies in bottles and setting them on the trail of an enemy, and with distributing magical remedies, strange combinations of feathers, hair, and plants, among his clients. An Obeah man might on occasion become dangerous and defiant, but the government, the author says, knows how to prevent this. If strict supervision were relaxed, he argues, development would no longer be checked, and voodoo would soon degenerate into the severe form encountered in Haiti. Photo: H. Johnston. Graves of prominent Negroes in Haiti. The duppy, or spirit of the deceased, continues to live in the grave and comes out at night to cause harm. The religious practices of followers of voodoo are described as aiming above all to keep the duppies confined in their graves. Between the mild and strict forms of voodoo, there are many transitions and variations, depending on the local administration governing the island: Danish, Dutch, French, or American. In the former Spanish colonies, for example, the Roman Catholic Church, according to the source, managed to keep fetish practices within what it regarded as reasonable limits, and acted sharply only when an especially bold Obeah man presented himself as a new god and attempted to win followers. Voodoo here is described as the public worship of the green serpent. Like the gods of many other peoples already discussed in the book, the serpent must be appeased so that it will keep evil spirits away. Offerings therefore become necessary. Chickens, goats, and goats without horns, by which young human children are meant, are said to be sacrificed. The priesthood of this cult, in the form the author attributes to Haiti, includes the Lub-Garos, described as religious abductors of children. The rolling calf in Jamaican folklore, against which mothers warn their children, is interpreted by the author as a memory of earlier child sacrifice. It is imagined as the bodiless head of a calf, with large rolling eyes, which licks children, whereupon they must either die or disappear. In Haiti, the source states, the blood of the sacrificial animal is smeared on the faces of initiates and drunk by the officiating priest. With a chicken, the head is bitten off and the blood sucked from the neck. With a goat, the heart is torn out. The ceremony takes place at night in the dark depths of the Haitian forest. The dull beat of tom-toms sounds, and bonfires burn dimly before a box in which the green serpent honored at the festivals is, or is supposed to be kept. The scene, in the author's highly sensationalized description, becomes ever wilder and more frightening. The spectators begin the loi loichi, or belly dance, which he says eventually develops into a full sexual orgy, and continues until dawn, or at least until men and women, intoxicated by excitement and exhaustion, sink to the ground in deep sleep. The largest of these night festivals is said to take place at Easter, and to last several days. Lent also gives rise to a boisterous carnival, celebrated in broad daylight in large towns such as Port-au-Prince. Photo: H. Johnston. Figure 210. A fetish tree in Haiti. According to the beliefs of the West Indian Negroes, the spirits of the dead live in particular trees. In order to appease them, wild ceremonies are held in the forests of Haiti. In Jamaica, the cotton tree is regarded as a fetish, and its roots are sprinkled with rum in order to keep the duppy away. Georg Buschan, America section, English translation 35. The love of music characteristic of the Negro race, in the language of the source, is also expressed among the population of the West Indian Islands. No festival is celebrated without the guitar, a true national musical instrument, coming into its own. It is played with considerable skill by the Negroes. The Creoles of Cuba and Puerto Rico, however, prove themselves musicians of the first rank. The music of these islands is full of deep feeling, favors minor keys, and is distinguished by a very peculiar rhythm by which it can easily be distinguished from the music of other countries. It has also become very popular in Spain, where the people adopted these melodies and blended them with their own folk songs. The dance music of the islands has spread over almost the entire world, and the tango with its peculiar hip and abdominal movements most probably comes from Cuba or Puerto Rico. By way of Argentina, where it was modified according to the character of the inhabitants, it then made its way to Europe, and there developed the familiar forms known at the time of the author's writing. Photo H. Johnston, Figure 211. Tom-toms, or voodoo drums, used in pagan fetish dances in the West Indies. Photo Th. Koch Grunberg, Figure 2 and 12. Talipang boys in ceremonial dress. Roraima region on the borders of Brazil, Venezuela, and British Guiana. The boy in the center leans on a reed. Several others hold dance clubs over their shoulders. South America. The native peoples of South America likewise belong to the Indians, although in outward appearance they differ in some respects from the North American type. Without doubt, North American Indians advanced southward across the Isthmus of Panama in very remote times and spread through the continent. Later, a migration in the opposite direction took place, which at the time of the discovery of America does not seem yet to have been completed. We have already encountered the Caribs and Arawaks as such returning migrants. From an anthropological point of view, the South American Indian occupies, according to the racial scheme used by the author, an intermediate position between the Mongolian, Caucasian, and Polynesian races. We have already mentioned elsewhere the theory that the original population of America may have arisen partly from immigrants from Asia and partly from immigrants from Europe. There are, in addition, indications for the assumption that Malay elements may also have migrated from Polynesia to South America by means of island bridges that perhaps existed in former times and may have contributed to the composition of the population there. The type of the South American Indian displays considerable variety. This is already apparent in stature. We encounter very tall tribes such as the Tehuelche or Patagonians and the Bororo, among whom individuals of 191 to 192 centimeters are by no means rare, with an average of 175 to 180 centimeters. Both tribes rank among the tallest people on Earth. On the other hand, there are also Indian tribes in South America distinguished by small stature, such as the Fuegians at only about 158 centimeters, who remarkably live close beside the tallest peoples, as well as the Trumai, Puru, Caribs of Guyana, and others. Georg Buschan, America section, English translation 36. The skin color of the South American natives generally shows a somewhat lighter tone, resembling yellow-gray clay. Naturally, darker shades also occur here and there. The hair of the head is usually coarse and straight, of a shining brown-black color. Alongside this, among some tribes, comparatively fine and slightly wavy hair occurs with some frequency, and even ringed or actually curly hair is found. Foreign admixture of blood, the author says, probably cannot be regarded as the cause. Photo Th. Koch Grunberg, Figure 213, an Umawa Indian from the Yapura River in eastern Colombia. The costume consists of a broad chest belt, a kind of vest made of stiff bast and richly painted red. It is fitted tightly around the chest and abdomen. The genital region is covered by an apron of fine bark fibers. Clothing corresponds to the particular level of culture. Among many tribes it is entirely absent, while among others it is very scanty. As Carl von den Steinen demonstrated, in its earliest beginnings, clothing here is not demanded by a sense of shame, but corresponds to the desire for protection against dangers from the animal world, especially a species of tick and small fish that tend to enter the external sexual openings while people are bathing. At the most basic stage, men's clothing accordingly consists of a hip cord, or only the foreskin is tied together or the penis is fitted with a covering. Among women, its place is taken by a small triangular piece of bast, called an uluri, tied over the vaginal opening and closing it tightly. At a further stage of development, this becomes a genital band or larger apron made of bark or bast. A peculiar garment consists of broad, stiff belts, made of bark, bast, or strings of beads, fitted tightly around the torso and constricting it to such a degree that the flesh bulges out at the edges. This corset is removed as rarely as possible and worn until it can no longer be used and the belt must be changed. In a similar manner, the limbs, upper arms, and lower legs are constricted, supposedly to strengthen the muscles. Among the Caribs, this deformation is a characteristic tribal peculiarity by which they attracted the attention of the first visitors to America. Indians living in colder regions wrap themselves in animal skins or blankets. Piercing of the face, especially the ears, nose, and lower lip, is practiced by most tribes of South America. Various ornaments are inserted into the resulting holes: plugs, sticks, rolled leaves, or colored feathers in the earlobes, often of such size or weight that the earlobe hangs down to the shoulder as among the Botocudo. Similar objects are placed in the nasal septum, the corners of the mouth, and the lower lip, including shells, thin wooden splints, and the like. Painting the body is also a very popular form of decoration, and sometimes reaches such an extent that, as Koch Grunberg says, at first sight the people look as though they were wearing a colorful knitted suit. Painting is carried out on solemn occasions, at festivals and dances, when guests are received, and on other special occasions. Young people practice it almost as a kind of sport. They take pains to invent ever-new patterns, and spend a large part of their time adorning themselves in this way, thus corresponding, the author says, to our dandies. Tattooing occurs much less frequently. When it does occur, it generally seems to serve as a tribal mark. The women of the Kadiu are distinguished by delicate arabesque-like designs. Photo, H. Johnston. Figure 214. Ona Indian family. Tierra del Fuego. Their clothing is made of seal, otter, or guanaco skins. In general, less attention is given to the care of the hair, though it is often decorated with beautiful feather ornaments. Featherwork, Figs 221, 223, and 224, is especially characteristic of South America. Beautiful cloaks, upper arm ornaments, and even entire costumes are produced from feathers with laborious work. Because of their great value, however, they are worn only on especially festive occasions, and in the intervals, they are carefully stored in woven boxes. The material is supplied by the brightly colored birds of the tropical world: parrots, macaws, ibises, herons, and others. Other ornament is extraordinarily varied. All three kingdoms of nature are made to contribute. Sometimes it consists of the teeth of large mammals, monkey, wild boar, jaguar, and so forth, pieces of fish jaw, claws of the armadillo, iridescent wing cases of jewel beetles or the horns of stag beetles, and shells. Sometimes of various fruit stones or seed capsules, sometimes also of shining or colored perforated stones or beads, Fig 222, worn around the body as necklaces or bands. The economic culture of the South American Indians is very varied. It is connected with the degree of their civilization and with the environment in which they live. Some still lead a wandering life as gatherers or hunters. These generally have no permanent dwellings but live beneath simple leafy shelters or in holes in the ground. The more sedentary tribes know proper grass huts, Fig 226, which are usually grouped into hamlets and more rarely into actual villages. Pile dwellings are also known. The name Venezuela, meaning Little Venice, comes from the similarity that the settlements encountered by the first arrivals on the lagoon of Maracaibo bore to the appearance of the Italian lagoon city. The use of hammocks is very widespread, especially among the Caribs and Arawaks. The English word hammock comes from the Arawak hamaca, the term used for this sleeping arrangement. The Yuapes have clan houses in which more than 100 people can be accommodated. The occupation of these more sedentary Indians is hoe cultivation or fishing, carried on with bows and arrows, harpoons, traps, or by poisoning the water. Livestock raising is also practiced in the Gran Chaco and among the Guajiro. After the introduction of the horse by Europeans, some tribes of the Gran Chaco and southern Argentina became excellent riders. Photo E. Nordenskjold. Figure 215. Ashlesley dancers. They dress in woolen blankets and wear bands around the forehead decorated with shells and ostrich feathers. Photo Underwood and Underwood. Native woman of South America carrying her child on her head in a fur-lined basket called a shahungju. When the basket is empty, it is used as a hat. The principal sources of food, Figs 225 and 228, are generally hunting and fishing. Meat and fish are usually made edible by roasting on racks or spits, and frequently in earth pits. Actual boiling is mostly unknown, because cooking pots are often entirely lacking. The Caribs, Georg Buschan, America section, English translation 38, and Arawaks prepare by an elaborate process a flour from the highly poisonous root of the manioc plant, which forms their principal food. Individual tribes are also described as still practicing cannibalism, Fig 227. Among stimulants and luxuries, tobacco occupies first place. It is smoked and taken as snuff. Tobacco is smoked either in the form of large cigarettes wrapped in maize leaves, which are often handled with a fork-like support, Fig 230, or in pipes of wood or clay. Snuff-taking is carried out in a very peculiar fashion. People blow the powder into their own or one another's noses by means of tubes. Photo, Th. Koch Grunberg. Figure 216. A Yabahana Indian from the Rio Apaporis, eastern Colombia. A long rod of shining black palmwood is passed through the nasal septum. The neck ornament consists of wild boar teeth. The armbands and loincloth are made of bast. Photo, E. Nordenskjold. Figure 217. Facial tattooing of Choroti Indians from the Gran Chaco, Bolivia. Photo, E. Nordenskjold. Figure 218. Facial tattooing of Choroti Indians from the Gran Chaco, Bolivia. Photo, E. Nordenskjold. Figure 219. Facial tattooing of Choroti Indians from the Gran Chaco, Bolivia. The South American Indians use bows and arrows as weapons. 220 and 229. The bows often splendidly decorated, as well as throwing spears with points dipped in poison, which in some regions are launched with a throwing board. They also use thrusting spears, and especially clubs. In some areas the blowgun, Fig 231, likewise with poisoned darts, is added for hunting. The mounted tribes of the steppes prefer the lasso and the bola, a throwing ball. Defensive weapons consist of shields, Fig 232, made of wood or hide, and armor made from hides or woven materials. A peculiarity especially associated with the Jivaro consists of their victory trophies made from the severed and specially prepared heads of slain enemies, Fig 233 and 234, the so-called sansas. The skin of the head, cut off as low as possible, is split by a lengthwise incision at the back of the skull and skillfully peeled from the underlying bones, together with the facial skin. It is then boiled in water, to which certain herbs, probably for disinfection, are added, and finally drawn over a rounded heated stone. This stone is gradually replaced by smaller and smaller ones, until a stone about the size of an orange is used. All the soft parts are smoothed from the outside with another heated stone, as though with an iron. The head, dried in this manner and as it were mummified, is sometimes filled with hot sand to preserve its shape, and is suspended by a cord as a sign of victory. A warrior's acquisition of a tsansa is followed by a great festival, the Tsansa Tukui, for which he must prepare himself properly. This preparation includes a long period of abstinence from certain foods, all game killed by arrows and numerous other animals, so that he may eat only fish, yucca, bananas, and certain small birds killed with a blowgun. Furthermore, when he goes outdoors, he must leave his spear at home, which, the author remarks, is a great renunciation for a savage, and he must abstain from sexual intercourse. He also paints his body with black lines and draws a similar stripe across the face from one ear to the other. He must observe these rules of abstinence for several months to 2 years. Cases were even reported in which they were followed for 6 to 10 years. Anyone who Georg Buschan, America section English translation 39, violates them is believed to bring great misfortune upon himself and his family, for the spirit of the slain person will not leave him in peace. Such a long period of preparation is also required because the young warrior must first obtain the food needed to entertain the numerous guests who come to the festival. He must plant yucca and bananas and harvest them in order to produce by fermentation an enormous quantity of chicha. He must also organize large hunts to obtain the necessary meat, which is then specially prepared for long storage. Because of the great expense, several young men generally join together. All relatives attend the festival, even those from the most distant regions. An old man entrusted with directing the ceremony takes the sansa from the hands of the warrior, who now appears once more carrying his spear, and dips it successively into a decoction of tobacco, into chicha, and finally into pure water. After compelling the hero of the day to sit down and pouring these various liquids into him, he returns the trophy to the warrior, who hangs it on the main post of his house, decorated with flowers, stuffed birds, and numerous other objects. The master of ceremonies then delivers a speech in honor of the young man. Men's dances and a drinking feast follow, usually lasting 6 days, during which the food distributed is consumed eagerly. On the final night, a number of fat pigs are slaughtered, and a strengthening broth is prepared from their meat, of which every participant drinks on the morning of the 7th day. The guests then return home, each receiving a large piece of meat to take with him. The purpose of this festival is said to be to reconcile the spirit of the slain person and dispose it favorably. From then on, the tsansa becomes a kind of fetish that secures wealth for its owner and his relatives, fertility for the fields, happiness in the family, and victory over enemies. Photo: Th. Koch Grunberg, figure 220, Tucano Indian from the Wao-Pez, northwestern Brazil, in ceremonial dress. The spear, which serves only as ornament, bears at its tip a mosaic of tiny feathers and human hair, and at its lower end a kind of rattle. The left arm holds a shield made of thin sticks bound together by a band of climbing plants. Photo: Th. Koch Grunberg, Figure 221, Yuanana Indian from the Rio Hualpes in ceremonial dress. He wears a headband of dyed feathers, from the rear end of which feathers of the white heron hang down to the ground. Photo, Th. Koch-Grunberg, Figure 222, Talipon girls, northern Brazil, in ceremonial dress. The headdress is a net-like diadem of cotton. The remaining ornament consists of beads. The face is painted with red patterns. Photo, Franklin Adams, Figure 223, Harvest Dance of Bolivian Indians. The enormous headdress consists of feathers. The accompanying music is played on large shepherd's flutes and drums. We are only imperfectly informed about the religious ideas of the South American Indians. From the observations made so far, however, it appears that they are based on animism and a basic belief in demons. For the Indian, the visible world is populated by numerous evil and good spirits who live everywhere in the air, in the water, and on the earth, and exercise a decisive influence on the fate of human beings, above all also on their death. Ancestor worship is also connected with this. Here too, therefore, human effort is directed toward making the evil spirits well disposed, or reconciling them. This is accomplished chiefly through dances in which masks, figures 235, 237, and 240, as well as the color art plate, play a special role. Such dances, recalling our carnival masquerades, are found everywhere among the forest Indians of South America. The masks presented in these dances are very different. Among the Cobewa, for example, they consist of coverings of thick white bast, painted according to a prescribed scheme with a variety of tasteful patterns. Among the Tacuna, of similar bast coverings furnished with a human or animal head modeled in beeswax over a framework. Among the Karaya, the masks are cylindrical structures of reeds with delicate feather ornament, worn on the head, together with a dense covering of leaves that envelops the rest of the body, all the way down to the toes. Among still other tribes, there are complete dance costumes woven in a single piece, including trousers, sleeves, and head covering, and many other forms. We owe to Koch-Grunberg, who during his travels was able to enter sympathetically into the world of ideas and feelings of a number of South American tribes, fascinating insights into the significance of these masked performances. Among the Cobewa and Kawa, such dances are performed in connection with deaths, figures 236 and 238. About 8 days after the burial, the men appear in the costume already described and perform a dance lasting from about 3 in the afternoon until the following morning. Women and children do not participate. Each mask is believed to represent a devil. The devil is in the mask, embodied in it, but takes possession of the dancer only temporarily, only as long as he is wearing the mask. At the end of the dance, early in the morning, the participants carry their masks to the village meadow, set them up on poles, tie the sleeves of each one to those of the next, and set them on fire. As the long row of figures burns from one end to the other, loud lamentation rises from all those assembled. It is said that by this, the devils are compelled to leave their coverings again and return to their usual dwelling places, which are probably imagined to be on some high hill or in a waterfall. The ordinary mortal cannot see these demons, but the medicine man can, because he is endowed with supernatural powers. He is also able to speak with them. The spirits whom the dances are intended to appease or prevent from further misdeeds are the spirits of animals, figures 242, 243, 244, and 248, of more or less evil beings in human form, of giants, figure 241, or dwarfs, figure 239. Curiously, especially dangerous spirits are often attributed to animals that are in fact particularly harmless. Thus the large azure-blue butterfly Tadaloko is regarded as one of the most dangerous demons. It is said to live in the highest of the waterfalls of the Huapes, and is seriously believed to brew malaria, so that everyone who drinks the river water contracts the disease. In fact, because of the stagnant water, malaria is especially widespread at this particular place. Other tribes hold masked dances for other occasions, for example the Yuri, Pase, and Tacuna at weddings, figure 246, when the hair of a newborn child is pulled out, and on other occasions. Almost always, however, the dances are connected with religious, figure 247, or mystical ideas. Thus the performances of the Cobewa on the upper Huapes, in which masks in the forms of birds, fish, and lizards appear, are intended to ensure that on the tribe's next expedition, the men bring home a rich catch of game and fish. The dances are always accompanied by music. Feather games and other games are also very popular among the Indians of South America. Figures 249 and 250. Photo. Th. Koch Grunberg. Figure 224. A talipang in ceremonial dress. The headdress consists of black and white feathers. The armbands and belt of braided cotton fiber. The apron is of European manufacture. Bow and arrow are used for fishing. Photo. Th. Koch Grunberg. Figure 225. Tucano Indians from the Rio Uapes, northwestern Brazil, at a meal during a ceremonial dance. Photo. Th. Koch Grunberg. Figure 226. Scene from the Parashara dance of the talipang. Some wear cloaks made from the ribs of Inaja palm leaves. The medicine man plays an important role in the life of the South American Indians and is often greatly feared by them. By virtue of his supposed endowment with supernatural powers, he is able to establish communication between human beings and the spirit world. Above all, to enter into relations with devils and the spirits of the dead, which often appear to him in the form of animals, and to make them serve either for the protection or the injury of his fellow people. He does this in cases of illness as well. He speaks over the disease, listens to the advice of the spirits, and at the same time learns what outcome the illness will have. By magic he tries to command the evil spirit, which formerly lived in an animal, but has now entered the body of the sick person, to leave the body again and seek out its old dwelling place. On the other hand, the medicine man is also believed capable of bringing illness and death upon a person by inducing an evil spirit to take possession of that person's body. Upon this mysterious power rests the influence and authority he exercises over the members of his tribe. In order to instill and increasingly strengthen belief in his supernatural dealings with the spirit world, the medicine man practices his arts at night in a solitary hut, where he skillfully imitates every kind of animal voice, and in this way gives those standing at a distance the impression that he is consulting with devils appearing to him as wild animals. Usually he is also capable of ventriloquism. He makes two voices converse with one another, now as though they were quite near, now as though they were far away. During his revelations and cures, the medicine man seems to put himself, through autosuggestion and other aids, into a state of ecstasy or induced sleep. He smokes tremendously, for example, takes large quantities of snuff and various narcotic substances, dances and sings, and for hours without interruption produces completely monotonous music with his magical implement, usually a gourd rattle, until he himself falls into a kind of trance in which all sorts of sensory illusions come to him. This is followed by a state of complete stupor in which he sees deceptive images and hears voices. As soon as he awakens, he describes these with various additions and embellishments. The Indians accept everything he reports, supposedly seen and heard in the dream state, as revelation. In addition, when treating a sick person, the medicine man performs all kinds of tricks. He fumigates the patient, blows clouds of tobacco smoke into his face or onto the diseased part of the body, kneads it, or spits on it. Finally, he sucks at the painful spot, and after a while produces from his mouth some object he has prudently concealed beforehand, a bone, thorn, shell, piece of wood, sand, beetle, centipede, or something similar. Through the great and continuous noise, monotonous singing, and other tricks he performs, the medicine man exerts, as it were, a soporific influence on the patient, so that the latter finally believes that the cause of his complaint has been discovered and that he is now cured. Masked dancers of the Opaina, a tribe on the Apaporis River in Brazil. The meaning of these dances, accompanied by wild monotonous singing, is obscure. They seem to serve religious purposes, especially the appeasement of spirits. They often imitate the activities of animals, for example the swallow or jaguar. Photo, Joseph Chamberlain. Figure 227. Young Putumayo Indians consuming enemies they themselves killed. The training of a medicine man begins in earliest youth, and often lasts for years. The candidate must prove that he possesses the power to maintain confidential intercourse with the spirit world. For this purpose, he withdraws to a solitary place, fasts there for an entire year without interruption, observes silence and other forms of abstinence, takes strong emetics, drinks tobacco water, and fights with wild animals, especially the jaguar, or at least claims to do so. At the same time, the novice is initiated by an old member of the Brotherhood into all the secrets of his art. It is believed that a medicine man can transform himself into an animal. Among many tribes, this is the jaguar. and that after his death, his soul does not travel to the dwelling place of the souls of ordinary people, but wanders forever through the forest in the form of an evil jaguar and becomes dangerous to human beings. As we have encountered among other so-called primitive peoples, among the South American Indians, the pregnant woman, and usually her husband as well, must regulate daily life according to strict rules. Among the Mauhe, for example, the expectant mother may live only on mushrooms, ants, and a baked food made from a particular plant. It is generally customary to avoid the flesh of certain animals in order to prevent their bad qualities from passing over to the child. To give an example, among the Caribs of British Guiana, if the father ate the flesh of a small quadruped, the child would supposedly turn out thin and scrawny. If he ate a particular small fish, the child would be born blind. If he ate wild boar, the child would get a snout. If he ate a certain bird, the child would remain mute. Photo, Th. Koch Grunberg. Figure 228. Indians from the Apaporis River roasting game. Fish and game are dried and smoked on simple racks. In this way they can be preserved for several days and even weeks. Photo, J. Brochurel. Figure 229. A Bolivian Indian in hunting equipment. The usual weapons are bow and arrows, more rarely throwing spears and lances. On festive occasions, the teeth or feathers of killed animals are worn as ornaments. Georg Buschan, America section, English translation 43. Childbirth among Indian women takes place either in the parent's house, in a separate hut removed from the others, or sometimes outdoors in the bush. In northwestern Brazil and Guyana, where people live in larger clan houses, the part of the house belonging to the family concerned is separated from the dwellings of the others by mats. The husband's mother assists at the birth, unless the woman in labor is left to herself. Often the entire process takes place in the presence of all the married women of the village. Men are usually not permitted to be present, not even the father of the expected child. If labor is delayed, among the Payagua and Baya neighboring women hurry in with small gourd shells or rattles, and shake them as vigorously as possible for a while, after which they leave again. The umbilical cord is either bitten through with the teeth, especially if the woman has no one to assist her in her isolated birthing hut, or cut with a sharp stone knife, a splinter of bamboo, or a shell. It may also be crushed between two stones, which at the same time stops the bleeding. Among the Makusi of British Guiana, cutting the umbilical cord is the duty of the mother or sister of the woman who has given birth. A different tool is used according to the sex of the child. For boys, a sharpened bamboo splinter. For girls, a piece of pipe reed. It is reported of women of various tribes that in former times they consumed the umbilical cord or the afterbirth. Photo, Th. Koch Grunberg. Figure 230. A Tucano Indian from the Uaupes smoking. A beautifully carved wooden fork serves as a holder for the large cigar. At the lower end it is fitted with a point, so that the holder can be stuck into the ground. The medicine men also use such giant cigars in healing the sick. Even after the birth, the parents generally continue their strictly regulated way of life. At first, they again adhere to a particular diet or even fast completely for several days. Among the Uaupes and Isana, their food consists exclusively of manioc root meal and baked ants. The young mother must remain secluded in her hut for about 5 to 10 days. Her husband keeps her company there. Neither of them may perform any work for a certain period. Among the Taulapang, the period during which the parents are forbidden to work extends to 3 or 4 months. The woman may fetch water but may not cook. The grandmother does this. She may not work in the field either. Her husband may not touch an axe or knife, may not prepare arrows, nor shoot with a bow, lest he cut, strike, or hit the child on the head. Any violation of these and similar prohibitions, which with regard to the father's diet, extend among some tribes for several months, and among the Iparina even for a whole year, would bring misfortune upon the newborn child. Photo Th. Koch Grunberg, figure 231. Buvagana Indian from the Rio Apaporis, with a blowgun 3 to 4 meters long. On his chest hangs a quiver of red wood containing poisoned darts. The long hair is held together by a bast band. A fairly widespread custom among South American Indians is the male childbed, or couvade. While the woman, often immediately after giving birth, resumes her household duties, the man withdraws for several days to the room in which the birth took place, lies down, waits, and cares for the child, and for his own part observes a strict postpartum diet or fasts completely. All this is done out of fear that if these rules are violated, the child may die or at least suffer serious harm. Thus, the Indians of British Guiana believe that if the father, Georg Buschan, America section, English translation, ate a rodent with strongly projecting sharp teeth, the child would acquire similar teeth, or that if he ate the flesh of a spotted animal, the child would receive mottled skin. He may not smoke or wash, and above all may touch no weapon. He may not even scratch himself with his fingernails if he itches. In that case, he must use a small piece of leaf or a stalk placed specially beside his resting place for that purpose. Among the Passe in Ecuador, the man paints himself black during the period of his childbed, while his wife remains in darkness for a month. Twins are generally regarded as an evil sign, as evidence of the woman's infidelity or possession by an evil spirit that had intercourse with her, and are therefore killed. Sometimes only one of the twins is killed. The Saliva also punished their wives on such an occasion for their supposed offense. In ancient Peru, the parents, after the birth of twins, were subjected to strict fasts, during which they had to lie alternately with one knee bent, until a bean placed in the hollow of the knee began to sprout from the warmth. After this, the pair was publicly led about with a rope around the neck, so that the supposed infidelity will not come to light. A campa or auntie woman in present-day Peru, who has borne twins, secretly buries the second child alive. Only the first is regarded as the husband's true child. Photo: Sir Everard M. Thurn, Figure 232, Shield Game of the Warao, at the mouth of the Barima River in British Guiana, who commonly settle disputes in this manner. Their upper bodies are hung with plant fibers and smeared with colored earth. The players brace the shields against one another and try to push each other backward. In northwestern Brazil, after the 5 days of seclusion have passed, both parents and the child take a common bath in the river under very peculiar formalities. Among some tribes of Brazil, including the Guarani and Tupinamba, the father, if the newborn is a boy, gives him small weapons, bow and arrows, while admonishing him to be brave. A few days after birth, the grandfather, more rarely the father, gives the child its name. Among the tribes of the Upper Negro, this event is connected with a great drinking feast to which all relatives are invited. Boys almost all receive 2 names, girls only 1. The names usually refer to animals or plants, rivers, body parts, remarkable events and places, or to the names of ancestors or godparents. Among some tribes, the child's mother is fumigated before the naming. Figure 233, prepared Javaro head, a victory trophy. Figure 234, prepared enemy head of the Munduruku. Photo: Th. Koch Grunberg. Figure 235, Cobewa Indians dancing. Note the peculiar form of the hat, which largely conceals the face, and the rattle they hold in the hand to beat the rhythm. Photo: Th. Koch Grunberg. Figure 236, funeral dance of the Cobewa Indians, held every 10 to 15 years. The bones of deceased relatives are burned, ground to powder, and mixed into the drinks consumed by the festival participants. In this way, they believe they acquire the good qualities of the dead. The dancers wear a bast band around the neck, carry a club under the arm, and blow flutes decorated with fish figures. Georg Buschan, America section, English translation 45. Cranial deformation likewise occurs among some South American tribes, including the Pampa, Araucanians, and Patagonians. Here, too, it results from the peculiar form of the cradle. The child is laid on a flat board and the head bound down with a leather strip passed around the board, which the mothers carry on their backs when traveling, just as North American Indian women do, or, when resting, hang vertically from a tree branch or stick into the ground by the 2 points into which the cradle board ends. Nursing continues for a very long time, as much as 3 or 4 years. Koch Grunberg observed among the Waupes a boy about 3 years old, who suddenly took the cigarette from his mother's mouth, drew a few puffs from it, and then sat down on her lap to nurse at the breast. As soon as puberty begins, boys and girls are subjected to certain formalities intended to test their courage and obedience. These are generally quite severe, and among some tribes have the character of outright torture. The tribes of northwestern Brazil and Guyana cut a girl's hair very short. On the Upper Negro, this is also done with young men. They carefully preserve the cut hair and put it on again on especially festive occasions. The cutting of the hair is followed by a long fast of 4 weeks, during which the girl is forbidden to eat the flesh of larger fish and warm-blooded animals. After the fast comes a ceremonial bath. On the following morning before sunrise, The father sings a long-drawn, unchanging tone and announces a list of all the plants and animals the girl may henceforth eat. Among the Baniwa of Guyana, during the first 4 days of her first menstruation, the girl sits on a mat in the middle of the house. She may eat only small pieces of manioc bread, which her mother or a female relative gives her from time to time, while avoiding direct contact with the girl. On the evening of the 4th day, the entire kin group assembles in a circle around the medicine man, who sings monotonously throughout the night. Those present accompany him in chorus. From time to time he blows upon a punch brewed from manioc, which is thereby supposed to be freed from enchantment. Early the next morning, the girl is given some of it to drink, and from that moment she advances to the rank of women of the tribe eligible for marriage. She then sits on a stool and receives 2 blows from the oldest or most respected member of the kin group. For this purpose, a scourge of braided palm fiber is used, to the end of which the sharp tooth of a fish is attached, so that every blow causes a bleeding wound. Before the old man strikes, he gives a solemn address to the girl and reminds her of her duties toward the kin group. The entire celebration ends with a general fight among men and women, which is usually quite rough. Finally, on the following evening, all the male participants gather for a celebration in order to dance and, above all, to get thoroughly drunk on yaraki, a mildly intoxicating native drink brewed from manioc root. By then, everyone is again good friends and cheerful. The festival begins with a masked dance. All participants wear masks of various animals and imitate their voices and gait. At the same time, a deafening noise is made with drums, trumpets, and flutes. This is intended to appease Mawari, the supreme evil spirit, and his devilish followers. Women may not be present at this masked dance. If a woman were to see Mawari, death would be her fate. Her father, husband, son, or brother, or if none of these were still alive, her nearest other relative would be obliged to kill her. Among the Taulipang, the declaration of maturity of young girls becomes a genuine torment. Large black ants caught in a net are placed with the net against the palms of the hands, arms, loins, and soles of the feet. The pain caused by the bites of the enraged animals is extremely severe and lasts for hours. The girl's grandmother, more rarely her mother, tattoos the corners of her mouth with the tribal mark, using as pigment charcoal from the burned body of a honeybee. They do this so that all the kashiri, which they make from grated manioc root, will be sweet as honey. The girl's hair is also cut at the nape. She must remain for several days in a hammock, separated from the rest of the family's living space by a partition. During this time, she may see only her closest female relatives, so that she will not lose the feeling of modesty. The grandmother makes sandals for her from palm stalks and coats her entire body with red paint. Then an old man, usually the grandfather, beats the girl with a palm fiber whip whose tips have been rubbed with red pepper so that the resulting wounds will hurt intensely. For a number of months, the girl must also follow a strictly regulated way of life. She may eat only very small fish and dishes prepared from manioc. She may not smooth her hair with her hand, but must use a palm stalk. She may not take part in field work, carry a basket, or touch a knife or axe, because otherwise she would supposedly suffer pain in the head and arms. Even speaking loudly is forbidden, as is blowing on the fire with her breath, because this might make her dizzy. When 5 or 6 months have passed under such conditions, the grandmother blows over all the objects belonging to the girl, while reciting strictly prescribed mysterious formulas, in order to prevent any misfortune from arising through the use of these things. Similar ordeals to those just described are encountered among the Caribs of British Guiana and among various Amazonian tribes, such as the Munduruku and Ticuna, as well as among the tribes on the Uaupes River. In the Gran Chaco, such customs are unknown. There, the first menstruation is celebrated only by dances. Among the Ashlasai, for example, the girl stands with her face covered, while the older women dance around her with sticks in their hands, to which rattles made of animal claws are tied, while the men beat the rhythm with gourds containing grains. Among the Chane and Chiriguano, the girl approaching puberty is confined in a compartment of her parents' hut, a kind of cupboard, and her hair is cut short. Only when it has grown again to half length does she regain her freedom. During that period she may leave her prison, only accompanied by her mother, in order to perform the most necessary acts, for example bathing. During her confinement, her food consists exclusively of cooked maize. As soon as her seclusion has ended, the girl is regarded as eligible for marriage. Photo, Th. Koch-Grunberg, Figure 237, Dance Mask of the Yahuna Indians. It represents the evil spirit Nakoladiyawa. Photo, Th. Koch-Grunberg, Figure 238, Funeral Dance of the Kawa Indians of the Rio Iari, northwestern Brazil. All these masks represent demons. Young boys likewise have to undergo severe tests of courage if they wish to obtain the right to be recognized as men. Among many tribes, this is connected with admission to a secret men's society. Among the Talipang, for example, all boys at this time receive a beating from the tribal elder, often their own grandfather, and must follow a strictly regulated diet for a whole year. In addition, the old man concerned inflicts cuts on various parts of their bodies and rubs various plant juices into them, supposedly so that the boy will have success with bow and arrow and blowgun when hunting or fishing. For the same purpose, a piece of palm fiber dipped in the same juices is pulled once back and forth through the youth's nose. Finally, he must also submit to an ordeal and allow ants to bite him all over the body. The Oyana boys suffer especially severely in this ant ordeal. They are tormented by the insects to such a degree that they usually collapse unconscious and have to be carried senseless to their hammocks, where they are then tied fast with cords for 1 to 2 weeks, while a fire is kept burning underneath them. Throughout this time they may eat only a small variety of smoked fish and manioc bread, and despite the great heat may drink no water. The torture is followed by a great dance festival lasting several days, at which the guests again appear dressed in masks and wearing elaborate headdresses. The boys are beaten again there. It is a general rule that boys treated in this manner, the ant ordeal, for which wasps are also used, is very common among various tribes of Brazil, must not utter any sound of complaint or pain throughout the entire procedure. Anyone who does must undergo the whole process again at the next opportunity. Photo, Th. Koch-Grunberg, Figure 239, Mask Dance of the Cobeoa Indians of the Rio Cuduieri, eastern Colombia. The dance is intended to appease the dwarf Macuco. Among the Karaya, the young men are taken from their parents' huts into special houses built for the bachelors of the village. There they live until marriage and lead a carefree life, for the entire community contributes generously to their support. The young men also receive visits from girls there. They pass the time hunting and fishing. Girls generally enjoy the greatest freedom and dispose of their bodies entirely as they please. In earlier times, greater modesty seems to have prevailed. Among the Ashlusle and Chiroti tribes of the Gran Chaco, prostitution among girls is described as nothing unusual. In love affairs, the Chiroti girl generally takes the first step. She simply leads the young man she wants as her lover for the night away from the dance into the forest. Courtship by girls for a man often leads to scenes of jealousy, with boxing gloves made of tapir hide or some other resistant object, and in the worst case even with bone awls. The two jealous rivals attack one another in order to gain possession of the beloved man. As a rule, a Chiroti girl, after her first menstruation, chooses a man who becomes her lover for several months. Then she changes partners and lives for several years carefree and enjoying herself. Later she decides to choose a permanent companion and becomes, in the author's description, an industrious housewife, faithful wife, and careful mother. A Chiroti or Ashlusle girl never kisses her lover. Affection finds expression in scratching and spitting on the face. The morality of girls among the Chane and Chiriguano, who live quite close to those tribes in the Chaco, is described very differently. They are anxiously guarded by their mothers and kept at home until a husband has been found for them. Photo, Th. Koch-Grunberg, Figure 240, Masked Dancers of the Yahuna Indians from the Rio Apaporis, eastern Colombia. They represent the male and female evil forest spirit, Wadya Yelaru. The jacket and face covering are made of red bast, the headdress is made of wood and painted, and the lower body is covered by an apron of yellow bast. Photo, Th. Koch-Grunberg, Figure 241, Masked Dance of the Kawa Indians from the Rio Iari. The dance is intended to appease the giant Kohako. Photo, Th. Koch-Grunberg, Figure 242, Butterfly Dance of the Kawa Indians. On the whole, the freedom of young girls does not last long, for they are generally married very early. Koch-Grunberg saw among the Indian women of British Guiana girls of 11 or 12 who were already mothers. Among many tribes, the custom of purchasing women still exists, including the Toba, certain tribes of Guyana and Colombia, and some others. The father of the girl for whom a young man is courting determines the price. It usually consists of a certain amount of livestock. As soon as the young man has paid this sum in full, he receives the woman, who from that moment, in the language of the source, becomes his property. The courtship of a Chane or Chiriguano youth is peculiar. If he has set his eye on a girl, he sends her parents all kinds of game or piles up firewood as a gift in front of their house. If they accept and use it, this means that the parents agree. If the wood remains untouched, the young man understands that he would be refused if he were personally to ask for the girl. If his gift has been successful, he asks the girl's mother for her. She replies that she cannot know whether he will be a good husband and capable of supporting his wife properly. In order to prove this, he enters the service of his future parents-in-law for an entire year. Marriage is a kind of purchase marriage. Among the most varied tribes, we also encounter the requirement that before a young man receives the consent of his future parents-in-law, he must demonstrate that he can support his wife, that is, that he is able to obtain sufficient returns from hunting and fishing. If he brings abundant game home from his expeditions, a Javaro father, especially if the suitor is strong and particularly skillful, does not hesitate to entrust even 2 or 3 of his daughters to him. If the suitor is welcome, the future father-in-law ties around the arms of the young couple a brown cotton band about an inch wide, which the girl herself has woven. The bridegroom pierces a small hole between his lip and chin, and inserts an ornament of colored feathers, and presents his betrothed with a tarachi, a piece of cotton cloth for a dress, and several other feminine ornaments. Finally, the couple paint and adorn themselves as well as they can. An old man of the tribe, apparently serving in the office of priest, gives them an infusion of tobacco to drink. The ceremony ends with dancing, singing, and a drinking feast lasting 2 or 3 days. This is described as the only occasion on which men and women dance together. Before the young man marries, he must clear a piece of ground, plant bananas or yucca, and build and furnish a hut. Once married, he then needs only to provide the means of subsistence by hunting or fishing. Photo Th. Koch Grunberg, Figure 243. Owl Dance of the Kawa Indians. The dancer moves like an owl in short leaps from tree to tree while trying to imitate the owl's call. Georg Buschan, America Section, English Translation 49. Photo Th. Koch Grunberg, Figure 244. Butterfly Dance among the Kobiyua and Kawa Indians. Butterflies are regarded as the demons of malaria. Very often the South American Indians betroth their children while they are still very young. Among the Javaro, this takes place while the children are still at the breast. At 6 years of age, girls are already considered marriageable, and are then transferred to the house of the husband to whom they have been promised. Sometimes such a child is sent there at an even younger age. The man's older wives then take charge of her, care for her, and bring her up according to the husband's wishes until she reaches marriageable age. Some tribes determine this age in a peculiar way. At the birth of a girl, they plant 3 or 4 chantaruru trunks, a kind of palm, around her house and tend them with the greatest care. As soon as the trees bear their first fruit, the girl is regarded as mature enough to marry. In British Guiana, however, no young man who may have been betrothed by his parents while still a child is bound by this promise. He simply asks that his promised bride return all the gifts made to her, such as beads and other ornaments, and is then free again. Among the Coroado, the future relatives of a child bride have the duty of caring for her. If her father dies or leaves the mother, the girl moves in with her future relatives, who from then on provide for her support. Among the Arawaks of Guyana, if the girl has not yet reached the age required for marriage, her father gives the young man to whom she has been promised either a widow or an older unmarried woman of the family as a wife. Later, this woman becomes the servant of the principal wife. Among the Mura, described by the author as a people at a very low cultural level, the admirers of a young girl fight one another with their fists to decide who shall have her. Among the Arawaks, there is also a peculiar kind of courtship. A young man who wishes to marry a girl goes to her father and begins to lament how badly a young fellow fares when he has no wife. The father agrees with him in all kinds of fine phrases, but leaves the decision to his daughter as to whether she wants the young man. If she sets meat and drink before him, he knows where he stands. His courtship has her approval and that of her father. He eats what has been served, and the marriage bond is thereby concluded. Among South American Indians, an actual wedding ceremony is often absent, though the marriage is usually celebrated with drinking feasts and dances. Among the Takuna of the Upper Amazon, masked dances representing devils are performed at weddings, at the puberty ceremonies of girls, and at other family festivities. Among the Karaha, On the wedding night, the young couple cut apart their long fringed knee bands and cuffs as a sign that the marriage has been consummated. As long as the marriage continues, these are never worn again. Photo: E. Nordenskjold, figure 245. Musicians of the Quichua Indians at Pelachuco, Bolivia. Photo: Th. Kosh Grunberg, figure 246. Spirit mask of the Tacuna Indians. It is worn for dancing at weddings and on other festive occasions. Georg Buschan, America section. English translation 50. South American Indians often live in polygamous marriages. Given what the author describes as their lax moral views, infidelity between spouses is said to be by no means rare. Nevertheless, there are tribes such as the Karaja, among whom a comparatively stricter view of married life prevails. If a man there leaves his wife or drives her away, he is ostracized among his companions and may not marry again. Among the Corowado, fights occur between a seducer and the deceived husband. If the former remains brave and wins, the woman he loves becomes his wife without further question. If, however, he gets the worst of the fight and must leave the field, the woman who had been seduced returns repentantly to her former husband. We have already heard elsewhere that the Indians attribute the origin of illness to the influence of evil spirits, and that their treatment accordingly consists in expelling or appeasing these spirits.
Physical methods of healing are also occasionally used, however. Thus the ashless lay massage the suffering part of the body. Figure 251. If the illness is epidemic and spreads rapidly, so that the usual remedies fail, the source says that nothing remains but to rid oneself of the sick, so that the healthy do not risk being attacked by the evil spirit. This is done by separating the sick from the healthy, either carrying them far away from the village, or abandoning the village and migrating elsewhere. Photo: E. Nordenskjold, figure 247. The Feast of the Cross among Christianized Quichua Indians. A boy and a girl carry paper lanterns behind the Holy Cross, one representing the sun and the other the moon. Evidently, according to the author, survivals of pagan belief. Photo: Th. Kosh Grunberg, figure 248. Jaguar dance of the Kawa Indians. The wearer of the mask represents a jaguar. It is made of white bast and painted with black and red rings. Its wearer imitates the animal with cat-like leaps and a howling sound produced on a tube with a pot serving as a resonator. If the sick person dies, his spirit is likewise feared, since it is assumed to be maliciously disposed toward the survivors and to seek to trouble them. From this fear arise a number of superstitious customs surrounding burial, intended to make the spirit of the deceased well disposed and prevent its return. The Indians cannot believe that death brings all earthly pleasure to an end. They assume that earthly life continues in an afterworld, and that the dead person carries on there in essentially the same manner as here on earth. They therefore place in the grave everything that belonged to the deceased's daily needs, together with some of his personal property. Since hunting and dancing represent the greatest pleasures for the Indian, the dead are buried with their weapons, bow, arrows, club, and so forth, and with complete ornaments, so that both will be available in the next world. Deceased women are given household objects, such as jars, baskets, and other domestic utensils. In order not to draw the dead person's revenge upon themselves, survivors also do not appropriate any of his personal possessions. Whatever is not placed in the grave is made unusable. Favored animals also often follow the deceased. In former times, it was customary among various tribes, when a great chief died, to send his faithful followers or servants, and sometimes his wives, into the grave with him. Even at the time of the book's writing, it was said still to occur that an infant was buried with its dead mother. Offerings of food and drink are also almost never lacking, for on the long journey to the other world, the deceased must not suffer hunger or thirst. If the survivors neglected anything in this respect, the dead person would supposedly be unable to detach himself from the world of the living, and would take revenge upon them. Fear of the dead is also expressed in numerous self-imposed punishments: fasting, beatings, self-wounding, and mutilation, carried out by survivors as outward signs of mourning. Usually renunciations or acts of self-torment are required only of the widow or widower, more rarely of other relatives as well. The mildest form of self-mutilation is cutting the hair, which is generally customary. A widow may not marry again until her hair has regained its former length. If a Chiriguano woman loved her husband especially deeply, she cuts her hair twice. Throughout the mourning period, the widow wears no ornaments and stays away from all festivities. In former times, mourning in La Plata went further. On each occasion of a death,
people cut off one joint of a finger. Fear of the spirit of a dead person also extends to all things that came into contact with the corpse, and even to persons who dealt with it. All who took part in the burial ceremony are therefore regarded as unclean. They have the duty to purify themselves, usually by bathing. The hut is not infrequently burned, or at least abandoned. Under some circumstances, the entire village is deserted in wild haste. In order to prevent the dead person from returning as effectively as possible, a number of precautions are taken. People often try to frighten his spirit by threats, shouting, the noise of musical instruments, gunshots, and similar means, both during the burial and afterward. The most usual noise-making instrument is the bull roarer, already encountered in the discussion of Australia, an elongated flat piece of wood swung on a cord that gives off an eerie humming sound. As elsewhere, women are strictly forbidden ever to see a bull roarer. Anyone who does see one may be punished with death. Amusing is the manner in which people try to mislead the dead so that he loses the trail. When the Araucanians in Chile leave the village after the death of a relative, they go back and forth in every direction so that the spirit cannot follow their tracks. When the Bororo carry the basket containing the bones of a recently deceased person out of the village in order to bury them in a remote place, someone runs behind the bearers dragging a palm branch so that all footprints are erased, and it becomes impossible for the spirit of the dead to find the way home. The most effective means, however, of making the dead person's return impossible, and thus protecting oneself from his disturbance, consists in tying up the corpse so that the knees are brought to the chin and the arms crossed over the chest, or forcing it into a basket, a large vessel, or a trough, and specially stamping down the earth thrown over it, or weighting the burial place with stones or heavy blocks of wood. Some tribes go so far in their fear of the dead that they avoid speaking his name and try to erase every memory of him from their minds. Thus, among the Guajiro in Colombia, no one may speak the name of the deceased in the presence of his family. Anyone who violates this rule is either killed immediately or must pay a heavy penalty, often consisting of 2 or 3 oxen. If he refuses this compensation, his cattle are taken from him by force. In the Gran Chaco, it is customary among some tribes after a death for all survivors to change their names so that the spirit will be unable to discover the person upon whom it might wish to vent its anger. Finally, lamentation for the dead is a custom found among many South American tribes. It is evidently closely connected with the protective measures described above and is always directly associated with any other burial ceremonies. The relatives generally sing the praises of the dead person, especially his heroic deeds, in every possible tone, in songs and other recitations. The ceremony then usually ends with loud weeping and wailing. Among the Coroado, only the female relatives withdraw after the burial to a hut, set apart from the others, where they mourn the loss with intense crying. Photo E. Nordenskjold, figure 249, Cherokee Indians of the Gran Chaco playing a game with red sticks or tubes that are pushed back and forth. Photo E. Nordenskjold, figure 250, Cherokee Indians playing a string game. The superstition that eating the flesh of particular animals causes their qualities to pass to the person who eats it, and even to the fetus in that person's body, may have given rise to the custom among many tribes of mixing the ashes of their ancestors into their drink, in order thereby to acquire the ancestors' good qualities. The Kobua, who practice this custom, also hold dances in which masks play a major role, as already described above. We may also recall the custom of cannibalism, formerly widespread among many so-called primitive peoples, which was generally intended to serve purposes similar to the mixing of the ashes of the dead into drink. It was formerly widespread, and according to the source, was still said to occur among certain tribes, such as the Ui Toto. The Indian who does this is said to intend both to take into himself the good qualities of his enemy and to destroy the enemy's personality completely, thereby protecting himself from the revenge of the spirit of the deceased. Photo E. Nordenskjold, figure 251, abdominal massage among the Ashlasite Indians. The manner of burial varies greatly. In many places, the dead person is forced into a narrow container and entrusted to the earth, generally in a common burial ground outside the village. A canoe that belonged to the dead person is also commonly used as a coffin. A Chiriguano man who has been killed by a jaguar is buried head downward so that he will not roam about as a jaguar. Burial also frequently takes place in the deceased person's own hut, which is then abandoned. If the burial place lies outside the house, a low roof is often erected over it, beneath which food is still placed for the dead during the first period after burial. The Karaja dig up the corpse after some time, collect the bones, and inter them again in an urn. There, after the mourning period has ended, the surviving spouse is again given the knee bands, as a sign that a new marriage may now be entered into.